Chapter 1363 The Might of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han immediately left after collecting the spatial spirit tools of the 8 heavenly body tier elites. He didn't stay back to examine his loot closely. He had no time to deal with the raging commotion that would sweep through Gathering Wind City as a result of the deaths of so many heavenly body tier elites. His principles were extremely simple. If someone wanted to kill him, then he would kill them first. Nothing more needed to be said. Several days passed, and Ling Han arrived at Big Trade City. There was a huge amount of wealth in the 8 elites' spatial spirit tools. In total, there were around 200 to 300 million true origin stones. Ling Han was delighted upon discovering this. Sure enough, looting others was the best way to obtain wealth. The others all came out from the Black Tower. After this stop, they would return to the joint peace planet. Thus, they all needed to make some preparations. Those who needed to pack things would pack things, and those who needed to bring people with them would prepare said people for the journey back. The higher Ling Han's cultivation level reached, the less afraid he was of other people discovering that he possessed a spatial god tool. Of course, the true secret of the Black Tower definitely couldn't be revealed. Otherwise, even the celestial realm would be astonished. Ling Han made his way to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. He had promised to help Han Xinyan master the refinement techniques of the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Now that 10 years had passed, how was that woman progressing? Although 10 years seemed long, how could the refinement techniques of level 8 divine pills be so easy to grasp? At that time, Ling Han had spent several months to master the refinement techniques of this divine pill, but he'd been completing comprehension under the reincarnation tree. If this were converted into real time, it would have been at least dozens of years, if not over a century. Ling Han was the alchemy emperor, yet even he needed to spend such a lengthy period of time, so one could imagine just how long it would take for others to master the refinement techniques of this pill. He had been in a hurry the last time he came here, and he had left with Ding Ping, Chen Ruijing, and the others shortly after finding them. He hadn't gone to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Thus, this was his reason for coming here again after 10 years. To immortals, a period of 10 years wasn't long at all. Most people possessed long lifespans, and 10 years was perhaps not even long enough to gray a single hair of a cultivator. Thus, Ling Han was immediately recognized by someone upon arriving at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Grandmaster Ling. More and more people started to exclaim his name. At that time, Ling Han had defeated all of the alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion by himself, winning the respect of everyone. Ling Han smiled as he nodded in acknowledgement. After his arrival was reported to the higher-ups, he was led to a small garden where he met Lin Yuqi. This woman was bewitching as always, and her eyebrows and eyes were all exuding a sense of indescribable seductiveness. She swept her gaze over Ling Han, and a look of astonishment instantly washed over her face. You were only at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier 10 years ago. Ling Han nodded, an indifferent expression on his face. Yet, you're already at the heavenly body tier now. Lin Yuqi exclaimed. She felt a little exasperated. Can't you act a little more shocked? Isn't it boring if I'm the only one yelping in astonishment? I know, Ling Han replied with a nod. He was naturally aware of his own cultivation level. Moreover, after reaching the heavenly body tier, he could also detect Lin Yuqi's cultivation level. She was also at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Lin Yuqi was rendered speechless. After a short pause, she composed herself and wiped the look of curiosity and shock from her face. Her expression became charming and seductive again, and she purposefully shuffled closer to Ling Han. A sweet fragrance wafted toward Ling Han. This fragrance was clearly very concentrated, yet it didn't smell overpowering or pungent at all. Handsome little brother, why don't you tell this sister how you reached the heavenly body tier so quickly? Ling Han took a step back and replied, Madam, shouldn't you know already? It was the Berserk Blood Spirit Pills, of course. Hey! You think this sister hasn't taken them before? Lin Yuqi said with a humph. Every time a Berserk Blood Spirit Pill is ingested, there'll be a cooldown period of 3 years. If one ingests too many in quick succession, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill will eventually become a deadly poison. So, why don't you tell me, how did you ingest so many Berserk Blood Spirit pills in just 10 years? Others might have been helpless about such a problem, but this didn't mean that Ling Han was also helpless. The Black Tower was a precious treasure from the Celestial Realm, and Hunyo had more so reached the Genesis tier in just 5 years. Compared to her, his cultivation speed was as slow as a snail. Ling Han simply replied with a faint smile. This was related to his biggest secret, so he naturally couldn't tell any outsiders. Oh, so you're treating sister as an outsider? You're still unwilling to tell me? Lin Yuqi was secretly simmering with anger. 10 years had passed, yet this person hadn't changed a single bit. He was still completely immune to her charm and seduction. Then, sister will submit to you. How about I become your woman? Her voice was laced with seductiveness, and her eyes were shimmering with charm. Her allure was boundless. Sure. Ling Han replied with a smile. Who was afraid of whom? He leaned forward as if he were going to embrace her with a chuckle, and said, Come, I'll take you as my 19th mistress. Pay. Lin Yuqi hurriedly turned around and stepped back gracefully. Handsome little brother, who would have thought that you were this kind of person? You even dare to tease this sister. Everything about her was charming and seductive, yet it was only ever her who was teasing and toying around with others' emotions. She naturally couldn't allow Ling Han to take advantage of her. Ling Han ignored her, and asked, Has Han Xinyan mastered the refinement of the Berserk Blood Spirit pill yet? No, Lin Yuqi replied with a shake of her head. There was a look of regret on her face. However, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she said, Handsome little brother, do you want to receive a great opportunity? What great opportunity? I'm all ears, Ling Han said. Since you're an alchemist, you'll definitely be interested in this, Lin Yuqi said confidently. She paused for a moment before continuing. The Treasure Forest Pavilion is made up of 4 major clans. They're the Lin, Shi, Han, and Huang clan, respectively. Not only is there conflict and competition between the 4 clans, but there's even conflict and competition within each of the 4 clans themselves. The Treasure Forest Pavilion has refined alchemical pills for generation upon generation, and the reason that it has become the most powerful alchemy force in the Long Light Galaxy is because. She paused and looked at Ling Han before saying, We have control over an ancient mystery realm from where we can obtain pill recipes and even godly medicines. However, this mystery realm only opens once every 100,000 years. Moreover, only a limited number of people is allowed to enter. Regarding how many quota positions the different branches of a clan can receive, this is determined by a series of intense competitions. However, there's also an age limit regarding who can enter the mystery realm. Not only does one have to be under 1 million years old, but their relative age also has to be under 30 years old. Thus, when fighting for the quota positions, only prodigies who satisfy these conditions are allowed to compete. Although Xinyan's surname is Han, she's been raised in our Anyuan branch Lin clan since a very young age. We have very high hopes for her, yet she still hasn't succeeded in mastering the refinement of the Berserk Blood Spirit pill yet. As such, it'll be extremely difficult for her to obtain a good result in the competitions. If you join the Anyuan branch of the Lin clan, I'll promise you a spot to enter the mystery realm as long as you can place in the top 10. Regarding what pill recipes or godly medicines you obtain, that will be up to your own abilities. What do you say? Ling Han didn't reply immediately. In reality, he had the Black Tower, so he didn't need to worry about getting screwed over. However, agreeing to this proposal too quickly wasn't good either. If he agreed immediately, he would either be stupid, or he would be blatantly admitting that he possessed a freakish life-saving trump card. How long is there until the mystery realm opens? He asked. A little over a year. Okay, deal. Ling Han said with a nod. A smile blossomed across Lin Yuqi's beautiful face, and she said, You're a smart person. I knew that you would definitely agree. We'll leave for the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion in half a year's time. You can use this time to complete some preparations. Sure, Ling Han said with a nod. Regarding Xinyan, I suggest that you head over to check up on her as well. If she's improved, perhaps we can obtain even more positions. Also, meet me again tomorrow. Sister needs to train you properly. Relative age refers to one's age with respect to their total lifespan. I think you can think of it as 1 year equaling 1% of the lifespan, roughly. Chapter 1364 Understanding Godly Medicines. To Ling Han, cultivation was incredibly important. However, alchemy wasn't something that he could neglect either. In his previous life, he had spent all of his time and effort on alchemy. He had relegated cultivation to a supporting role for his alchemy. In this life, however, he valued cultivation far more than alchemy. Cultivation was what would give him the strength and power to do as he pleased in this world. However, this didn't mean that he would give up on alchemy. It was quite the contrary, in fact, with alchemy still holding a very important position. This was because he had many friends and family, many of whom needed more and higher quality alchemical pills. Thus, he had agreed to Lin Yuqi's request without much hesitation. After returning to his temporary residence, everyone expressed their approval for his decision. In any case, the better Ling Han's alchemy skills, the more benefits they would receive. Only the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was a little unhappy. She had heard that the manager of the Treasure Forest Pavilion was extremely bewitching and coquettish. Of course, she still believed in Ling Han. If Ling Han were truly a playboy, he could have gathered himself heaven knew how many stunning beauties on his journey to the immortal realm. To say nothing of the immortal realm, Ling Han had already become the undisputed king while he was still in the lower realm. He was the most powerful person in that world, and there were definitely countless beauties who would have willingly thrown themselves at him. The next day, Ling Han went to meet Lin Yuqi after giving some guidance to Han Xinyan. Although Han Xinyan was talented in alchemy, it wasn't an easy task to master the refinement of level 8 divine pills. Moreover, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill was a saint pill among level 8 divine pills, making it even harder to grasp than other ordinary level 8 divine pills. It was impossible for her to comprehensively master this pill recipe within 100 years. Ling Han had initially thought that Lin Yuqi would hand him some new pill recipes to learn so that he could use them during the competition in half a year's time. However, his expectation couldn't have been further from the truth. The seductive woman retrieved a godly medicine, and asked, "Do you know what medicinal plant this is?" Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. She was actually using this to test him? She was underestimating him far too much. He shook his head, and replied, "This is the 3 clouds grass." Lin Yuqi chuckled before suddenly snapping her fingers and unleashing countless blade-like auras. The godly medicine was instantly sliced into tens of thousands of pieces. She reached over and collected all of these pieces into her hand before placing them on the table, and saying, "Okay, now I want you to put this godly medicine back together." Ling Han was astonished. She's even testing me like this? But what's the point? This is testing your recognition of godly medicines. Not only will you be tested on this during the clan competition, but you'll even be tested on this inside the mystery realm should you want to receive the rewards that it offers. Thus, you have to reach a certain level in this skill as well. Simply being good at refining pills alone isn't good enough, Lin Yuqi said calmly. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He casually waved his hand and separated the tens of thousands of pieces of the godly medicine, with not a single piece overlapping. He then recalled the original appearance of the 3 clouds grass in his mind. Afterward, he started to shift the pieces and reconstruct the godly medicine. "You made 37 mistakes," Lin Yuqi pointed out after he had completed reconstructing the godly medicine. Ling Han didn't believe this. However, Lin Yuqi immediately identified these 37 mistakes and reordered their positions. Sure enough, the final result looked far more natural than what it had been before. He had no choice but to concede that Lin Yuqi was indeed correct. There is a total of 810,000 godly medicines throughout the entire immortal realm. Moreover, through hybridization and nurturing, these godly medicines can undergo all kinds of transformations. Even so, these transformations won't diverge from their core. After all, they're simply a variation of the 810,000 types of godly medicines. Thus, you need to fully understand and grasp these 810,000 godly medicines. That way, you will have grasped the unique properties of all the godly medicines in the immortal realm, Lin Yuqi said calmly. At this moment, she wasn't a bewitching and seductive beauty anymore. Instead, she was more like a knowledgeable scholar. Ling Han nodded in agreement. If others were right, he would have to accept their comments. He couldn't hang on to his old and outdated views. In any case, her words had indeed opened his eyes to an entirely new world. So, as it turned out, being able to refine pills alone was far from sufficient. Here, these are the illustrated encyclopedias of godly medicines. Lin Yuqi tossed a small mountain of books at him, and said, even with the power and influence of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, we still can't collect information on all the godly medicines in the world. However, these are copies of the encyclopedias that we obtained from the Mystery Realm. They should be enough to teach you about all the godly medicines. Thank you, Ling Han said earnestly. The knowledge from these encyclopedias would also be extremely valuable to him. Of course you need to thank me and remember all that I've done for you. She hadn't been serious for long, and she had already turned back into a bewitching beauty again. She started to make eyes at Ling Han. Ling Han was speechless. He immediately gathered up the encyclopedias and left. After returning to his residence, Ling Han started to comprehend in seclusion. He sat under the reincarnation tree and furiously brushed up on his knowledge of godly medicines. There was a total of 810,000 godly medicines, so it was going to be a huge task to memorize the unique characteristics and shapes of all of them. Moreover, Lin Yuqi had extremely high standards, and she expected him to possess the ability to flawlessly piece any godly medicine back together after they were sliced into tens of thousands of pieces. This was incredibly time-consuming, as well as extremely taxing on the mind and body. Fortunately, he had the reincarnation tree. This was like a massive cheat code. Otherwise, he would only have half a year to memorize all of this knowledge before the clan competition began. With the help of the reincarnation tree, he had around 200 years' time. Fuck it. I'll do this. Ling Han entered the world of godly medicines. Under the reincarnation tree, he didn't have any other unrelated thoughts. Godly medicine after godly medicine sprang to life in his mind, their unique characteristics and shapes as clear as day. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Time slowly crept by. Ling Han had only grasped the qualities of 200,000 godly medicines, yet he was confident that his alchemy skills had elevated to another level. He possessed a comprehensive understanding of the intricacies of these godly medicines, and thus he would definitely be more comfortable and skilled when he had to fuse the medicinal properties of different godly medicines together. After reaching this stage, Ling Han had already developed a strong interest in the intricacies of all the different godly medicines. Thus, even if he didn't have to participate in the clan competition of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and even if he didn't have a chance to enter the ancient mystery realm, he would still persist in mastering the knowledge of all the encyclopedias. They were far too valuable and helpful. This was only natural. After ascending to the immortal realm, he had slowly found his way around alchemy by himself. Even though he was the alchemy emperor, there was still a risk that he might go astray. Right now, comprehending these godly medicines was essentially the same as correcting his own path. Half a year passed, and Ling Han had only just grasped the qualities of 400,000 or so godly medicines. In other words, he had only grasped the qualities of around half of all the godly medicines. He couldn't help but sigh in emotion. If only he had another 6 months of time. However, half a year had already passed, so Ling Han placed everyone else into the Black Tower. They could cultivate under the reincarnation tree there, and they would also have the guidance of a saint. Thus, that was naturally the best place to cultivate in the entire immortal realm. Ling Han arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion, only to see that Lin Yuqi was already finished with her preparations. Meanwhile, Han Xinyan looked a little dejected. She still hadn't mastered the refinement of the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, and thus she lacked belief and confidence for this competition. Let's go. Their transportation tool was still Lin Yuqi's extremely luxurious carriage. One wouldn't feel any turbulence when sitting inside this carriage, and it would feel as if they were traveling over flat land. Apparently, the journey to the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion would take 10 or so days. Ling Han couldn't help but feel that this was a shame. If he could spend this time inside the Black Tower, he could definitely memorize the qualities of several thousand more godly medicines. Brother Han, how many godly medicines have you grasped now? Coincidentally, Lin Yuqi was also thinking about this matter. However, the way with which she referred to Ling Han would change every single day. Ling Han sighed, and said, only 400,000. Pooh. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan both broke into a fit of coughing. Their faces were filled with a look of utter disbelief. Chapter 1365 Supreme Natural Talen. Ling Han sighed, and said, I know, this is far from enough. Oi, are you joking around? Lin Yuqi was completely stunned, so much so that she had forgotten to tease Ling Han. Joking around about what? Ling Han asked in astonishment. So you're saying that you've already memorized the unique characteristics of 400,000 godly medicines? Lin Yuqi asked. Ling Han finally understood what was going on. Although he had spent over 200 years familiarizing himself with these godly medicines, only half a year had passed in the outside world. Memorizing the unique qualities of 400,000 godly medicines in just half a year was indeed a stunning feat. However, he had already revealed this to them, so he couldn't take his own words back. He nodded in confirmation. You're either lying, or you're a true genius. Lin Yuqi exclaimed. I started studying godly medicines when I was 8 years old, Han Xinyan said. In the past 106,000 years, I've never stopped studying them, not even for a day. However, up until now, I've only managed to grasp the unique qualities of 270,000 godly medicines, yet I'm already regarded as a prodigy. Ling Han was stunned. What kind of brain do you have? You only managed to memorize the unique qualities of 270,000 godly medicines in over 100,000 years? Hang on. How can the Treasure Forest Pavilion raise such also-rans? Moreover, Han Xinyan is indeed talented in the area of alchemy. I've seen her talents with my own eyes. So, the problem definitely doesn't lie with her. Rather, it lies with me. Indeed, Ling Han was far too freakish. He was the alchemy emperor, so did he also possess a supreme talent when it came to memorizing godly medicines? This was the only plausible explanation. Let me test you. Lin Yuqi randomly retrieved a godly medicine, and asked, what's this? Ling Han took a glance, and immediately replied, Blazing Sun Heart Lotus. Like she did half a year ago, Lin Yuqi shredded this godly medicine into tens of thousands of pieces before saying, put it back together. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and the shredded pieces of the godly medicine immediately started to dance in the air. His hands became a blur as he reconstructed the godly medicine. As he did so, he used his origin power to hold all the pieces together. It wasn't long before the silhouette of a divine lotus appeared. Then, it gradually became more and more detailed, until it was finally reconstructed back together. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan both examined the godly medicine carefully. However, looks of astonishment quickly spread over their faces. Sure enough, there wasn't a single mistake. Again. Lin Yuqi retrieved several more godly medicines as she continued to test Ling Han. There were some godly medicines that Ling Han didn't recognize, and they would skip over these directly. However, if he recognized the godly medicine, he would be able to reconstruct it rapidly and without any mistake. There was a bright glimmer in Lin Yuqi's eyes. She only knew that Ling Han was extremely talented in alchemy. Unexpectedly, he was even more talented when it came to memorizing and understanding godly medicines. She had truly plucked out a gem. She turned around and used the power of regulations to obstruct Ling Han's senses. When she turned back to face him, there was already a handful of shredded godly medicines in her hands. They were all mixed in together. How many different kinds of godly medicines are in my hands? What are they respectively? She asked. She had clearly raised the difficulty of her tests. Ling Han identified them one by one, and in the end, there were only 3 godly medicines that he couldn't name. He put the pieces of these godly medicines aside, and said, I definitely haven't studied these godly medicines yet. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan were already numb with shock. They were both experienced in this field, so of course they had also learned how to identify godly medicines before. However, even if they could recognize all of these godly medicines, they definitely couldn't name them as quickly as Ling Han had. His comprehensive grasp over the intricacies of these godly medicines was as if he had completely seared the images of them into his mind. Otherwise, the external appearance of these godly medicines was far too similar, thus making them incredibly difficult to differentiate. This was especially the case when only looking at their shredded pieces. All of these things meant that it was extremely easy to misidentify the godly medicines. However, Ling Han was completely unaffected by these challenges. One had to realize that Lin Yuqi had purposefully shredded 10 godly medicines that were extremely similar in form and quality, yet Ling Han hadn't made a single mistake when identifying them. Let's up the difficulty again, Lin Yuqi said. She retrieved 100 godly medicines, all of which Ling Han recognized. She then shredded them and mixed them up before placing them on the table. Reconstruct them. Ling Han smiled faintly. He waved his hand and swept all of these shredded pieces into the air. He then swept his gaze over them, his eyes quivering slightly as he did so. He had already memorized all of the pieces that he had seen. His brain started to whir, rapidly piecing the shredded godly medicines back together. Ling Han was indeed talented and it came to identifying and memorizing godly medicines. When he was still in the lower realm, he could memorize any godly medicine with a single glance. It was just that he had never been tested in such a way before, having to reconstruct several godly medicines after they were shredded into tens of thousands of pieces. Following the rise in his cultivation level, his divine sense also became more and more powerful. Otherwise, there was simply no way that he could simulate in his mind the reconstruction of 100 godly medicines at once. One had to realize that there were over 1 million shredded pieces. He practiced the indestructible heaven scroll, so the might and resilience of his divine sense were both above his cultivation level. As such, he was able to detect and consider extremely tiny variations. This gave him even more confidence. Ling Han continued to reconstruct the godly medicines, making them more and more complete. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan were both wide-eyed with astonishment. Even their dainty mouths were hanging open in shock. This was especially the case with Lin Yuqi, who had even stuck her tongue out to lick her alluring lips. She was instinctively trying to tempt him, even while experiencing such deep astonishment as expected of this bewitching woman. It wasn't long before Ling Han stopped his movements. He had already completed the task. You're an absolute freak. Lin Yuqi exclaimed. She exhaled slowly, a delightful glimmer in her eyes. Ling Han's smooth and flowing motions had been surprisingly pleasing to the eye. In fact, she even felt a twang in her heart. Meanwhile, Han Xinyan couldn't hide her admiration for him, saying, I need to spend at least 10 million years more before I can reach your level. Brat, join our Lin clan. Lin Yuqi's eyes were glowing brightly, and she said, What do you say? How about I betroth Xinyan to you? Onto you. Han Xinyan exclaimed. Her face instantly flushed red. Ling Han laughed and said, Madam, you sure know how to joke. Upon hearing Ling Han's reply, Han Xinyan's expression involuntarily changed slightly. Women were indeed strange. It was fine when they rejected others, yet when they were the ones being rejected, they would feel extremely uncomfortable and uneasy. What's so bad about me, they would think. Lin Yuqi squinted her eyes seductively as she shuffled closer to Ling Han. A pleasant fragrance blew over, and she flashed him a charming smile. Little brother, do you like women who are more mature? Maybe someone like this sister? On to you. Han Xinyan hurriedly tried to drag this bewitching woman away. She was acting far too brazenly. She had just tried to market her, and now she was even trying to sell herself. How embarrassing. Your breasts are small, so there's no room for you to speak. Ling Yuqi said as she pushed Han Xinyan aside. She then puffed her chest out as if expressing her dominance. Indeed, her breasts undulated beautifully, their shape full and filled with a mesmerizing allure. Ling Han simply smiled, and said, I already have a wife. If Madam wants to enter the Ling family, you can only become the 22nd mistress. Wasn't it the 19th? Lin Yuqi said with a seductive laugh, not trying to hide her undulating breasts at all. She didn't mind giving Ling Han some eye candy. Ling Han wasn't distracted by this, and he replied, someone as licentious as me will definitely wed several more mistresses in half a year's time. Han Xinyan didn't know whether this was true or not, so she couldn't help but scorn Ling Han in her mind. Ling Han was indeed supremely talented in alchemy, yet his character was quite depraved. You have 22 wives. Do you have enough time and energy to please them all? Upon thinking of this, her pretty face involuntarily flushed red again. What did this have to do with her? Chapter 1366 Hengyun Branch. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan both believed that Ling Han could indeed identify over 400,000 godly medicines. They didn't test him anymore, and instead started to fill him in on the details of the clan competition. This way, he could prepare himself for what was to come. Just like Lin Yuqi had tested him before, the clan competition also tested the competitors in a similar manner. Each competitor had to take 4 examinations identifying godly medicines, reconstructing medicinal ingredients, identifying mixed medicinal ingredients, and finally pill refinement. The competitors would receive a score for each of the 4 rounds, though the weighting of each round was different. For example, the first round only made up 10% of the total score, while the final round of pill refinement made up 50% of the total score. After all, this was the most important ability of an alchemist. The carriage continued to whiz through the lands. After 13 days, they finally arrived at Azure Rain City. This was the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and the ancestral lands of the Lin clan, Shi clan, Han clan, and Huang clan all were located within this city. However, what the Treasure Forest Pavilion was famous for was its alchemy. The Treasure Forest Pavilion exuded an aura of might and wealth. In reality, however, the Treasure Forest Pavilion wasn't weak in terms of cultivation either. In fact, the 4 major clans all had Eternal River tier elites within their ranks. Otherwise, there was simply no way that they could guard their massive wealth. However, in terms of how many Eternal River tier elites each clan had, and in terms of what specific cultivation level they had reached, this was a closely guarded secret of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. On the surface, the Cloud Apex planet only had a measly 20 or so Eternal River tier elites. However, as Ling Han learned more and more about the different forces, he was certain that this was definitely a severe underestimation of how many Eternal River tier elites there actually were. It was more probable that there were 20 elites at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Anyhow, Azure Rain City was a holy land for alchemy. Each day, carriage after carriage of alchemical pills would be dispatched from this city to numerous cities throughout the 2 imperial empires. Of course, Azure Rain City wasn't far from the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire either. In fact, the Treasure Forest Pavilion had built its headquarters here because it had been attracted by this location's convenience. In this city, almost every family was involved in the business of alchemy. Even if they weren't alchemists, they would be medicinal farmers or medicinal harvesters. As such, there was a complete and massive supply chain here. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had a history of over 1 billion years on the Cloud Apex planet. During this time, they had even experienced the destruction of an imperial empire, as well as the rise of another imperial empire. However, they hadn't been affected at all. They had continued to earn huge amounts of true origin stones, just as they still continue to do so today. After all, regardless of who was in power, cultivation was still heavily reliant on alchemical pills. In any case, it was rumored that the rise of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire was partly thanks to the support that they had received from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. According to hearsay, the Treasure Forest Pavilion had donated a huge sum of true origin stones to support the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Otherwise, the previous Imperial Empire wouldn't necessarily have fallen. Moreover, after so many years of development, the four major clans had also branched out into a massive network that contained numerous smaller branches. Furthermore, after several usurpations by powerful branch families, the four major clans already didn't have any notion of a main branch. Whichever branch was stronger was whichever branch wielded power. Tides would turn, and power would also shift hands. Right now, the leader of the Lin clan was the Biyao branch. They had already enjoyed this position for over 9 million years. This was because the Biyao branch had a level 16 alchemist, allowing them to suppress all of the other 99 branches. Lin Yuqi belonged to the Hengyun branch, and this was a branch that was ranked near the bottom among all of the branches of the Lin clan. The strongest alchemist in the Hengyun branch was only a level 13 alchemist. Moreover, this alchemist had only just reached the Eternal River tier. It was also because of this that a prodigy like Lin Yuqi could wield so much power at such a young age. She had traveled to Big Trade City to search for external help in the hopes that the Hengyun branch could achieve a better standing in the clan competition this time around. That way, they would be able to send more branch members into the Mystery Realm. Entering the Mystery Realm was a huge opportunity that could turn a branch family's fortunes. Otherwise, the Hengyun branch could only continue to wallow in its incompetence until the day that it was finally disowned by the clan. In fact, there were far more than 100 branches in the Lin clan. However, only the 100 most powerful branches had the right to have an official existence in the Lin clan. The weak would be eliminated by the strong, and this was a rule that wouldn't change for all eternity. Because the Hengyun branch wasn't powerful enough, Ling Han and the others could only stay in a place that was relatively old and derelict. This was unlike the branches ranked near the top, where the courtyard of any random member was already larger than the total of their 3 residences. Moreover, looking at the other branches, they all had 10 people participating in this competition. This was the upper limit for how many people could compete from any one branch. However, the Hengyun branch only had 2 competitors in Ling Han and Han Xinyan. This was a clear sign of their desperate situation. More importantly, both of these competitors were external helpers. Shockingly, the Hengyun branch hadn't been able to find any branch member who was talented enough to compete. Lin Yuqi was also a prodigy, yet most of her talent was in the field of cultivation. Although she was also talented in identifying medicinal ingredients, she was a complete amateur when it came to actual pill refinement. However, pill refinement was the biggest part of this competition, so those who were poor in this area were destined to receive bad results. After settling in, Ling Han immediately entered the Black Tower. Right now, he was extremely interested in learning about the unique qualities of different medicinal ingredients. Pung! There was a huge boom as the main door of their courtyard was kicked open. 5 people appeared, one of them a sturdy middle-aged man. He appeared especially casual, and his entire upper body was naked. His thick chest hair quivered in the wind, and it truly looked a little too lively. Behind him were 4 youths, 3 men and 1 woman. They all had an air of arrogance about them, and it was as if they were the favored sons and daughters of heaven and earth. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan had been chatting in the living room, and they immediately dashed out upon hearing the loud commotion. Upon seeing the collapsed front door, their expressions changed drastically. Lin Feng, are you crazy? There was no sign of charm or seductiveness on Lin Yuqi's face as she roared at the middle-aged man. A look of disgust spread across her face as she glanced at the thick hair on his chest. These 5 people were naturally from the Lin clan as well. They belonged to the Hengyun branch, and this branch was powerful enough to rank in the top 10 out of the 100 official branches. The middle-aged man was called Lin Feng, and he was the leader of the Hengyun branch's group for this competition. His cultivation was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. Lin Feng greedily stared at Lin Yuqi's shapely breasts. He had traveled to the Anyuan branch several thousand years ago, and he had come across Lin Yuqi by coincidence. It was from that time that he had started to lust after this seductive beauty. He had asked for her hand in marriage, yet Lin Yuqi had expressed absolutely no interest in him. However, he had been apprehensive while in the Anyuan branch's territory, so he hadn't dared to make a huge scene. This time, he was leading the Hengyun branch's team for this clan competition. After learning that Lin Yuqi had also come here, he couldn't resist his urge to come over. Yuqi, your Anyuan branch is destined to fall into insignificance, so why stay in that futureless branch? Why don't you marry me and enter the Hengyun branch? The Hengyun branch is one of the top 10 branches, and we can offer you countless cultivation resources. You should know that this is the best choice for you, Lin Feng said earnestly. It was a shame that he continued to leer at Lin Yuqi's face, breasts, and legs as he said this. No matter how one looked at him, he was a damn disgusting pervert. Regardless of how weak my Anyuan branch is, it's still got absolutely nothing to do with you. Lin Yuqi was indignant as she pointed at the main door, and shouted, "Scram! Heh, is there any need for this?" Lin Feng was an extremely shameless person. Lin Yuqi had rejected him before, so it was only natural that she would reject him again. He chuckled, and said, "There are 3 more days until the competition begins, so why don't we let the young uns warm up first? How about some sparring?" He sneered coldly in his mind. This time, he was definitely going to show that woman. Chapter 1367 Overbearing Attitude. There was fury on Lin Yuqi's beautiful face. She wasn't afraid of sparring, yet Lin Feng had kicked their door down and berated them before asking to spar. This was still called sparring? If you want to spar, we can see each other's abilities in 3 days' time. Now, hurry up and scram, she shouted in irritation. Lin Feng laughed loudly, and said, "Then I'll take it that you're admitting defeat. Anyuan branch. You're all trash and betas," a green-robed man from the Hengyun branch shouted with a sneer. "Heh, brother Zihong, they're indeed trash. However, those people definitely aren't betas. After all, they don't have a third leg down there," another young man from the Hengyun branch said. His robe was azure in color, and there was the image of an alchemy cauldron sewed onto its back. "Ha ha ha, Jianye is correct," the other man and woman said as they clapped their hands in approval. They appeared extremely arrogant, and it was clear that they didn't have an ounce of respect for Lin Yuqi or Han Xinyan. Han Xinyan shook in fury. She was just about to step forward and challenge these 4 youths. However, Lin Yuqi extended her arm and held her back. This kind of sparring would be completely meaningless. After all, these people had clearly come to humiliate them. There was a menacing edge to her voice as she said, "If you can't control the mouths of those 4 wild dogs, don't blame me for being ruthless with them." Lin Feng shrugged, and said, "Yuqi, you're far too domineering. Are they not even allowed to speak now? In any case, this is a matter for the Hengyun branch. What right does the Anyuan branch have to interfere with us?" "She's fairly good-looking, though," Lin Jianye said as he stared at Han Xinyan. "She has the right to become my maid." "Heh, more like a mistress to service you alongside your wife, no?" Lin Zihong said wantonly. "It's just that her breasts are too small. They won't feel too good in the hands," Lin Jianye said. He purposefully made a reaching and grabbing motion as he said this. He was as nasty as could be. Han Xinyan was shaking in rage, and Lin Yuqi's eyes had also become icy cold. "Pa!" She suddenly made a slapping motion, and a large hand that was formed from origin power materialized in the air and struck Lin Jianye's face. "Pooh!" Lin Jianye spat out a mouthful of blood as well as 4 broken teeth. His hair was a mess, and he appeared extremely disheveled at this moment. A sly smile tugged at the corners of Lin Feng's mouth as if he had succeeded in his plan. However, He quickly hid this smile, and said with a serious expression, Lin Yuqi, as a senior, what are you trying to do by picking on your juniors? There's no other way around this. I have to teach you a lesson. He had purposefully had these youths infuriate Lin Yuqi such that she would lash out in anger. That way, he would have a legitimate excuse to target her. You've beaten my juniors, so I naturally have to step forward to capture you. No matter how one looked at this, he was the one in the right. Moreover, after he had ravaged Lin Yuqi, all he would need to do was hold firm in his innocence and claim that it was she who was trying to slander him. In any case, that would merely be his word against hers. In any case, after ravaging her a few more times, perhaps Lin Yuqi would submit to him? Firstly, she was already at a disadvantage when it came to this because she was a woman. Secondly, this woman clearly looked like a promiscuous B*TCH. As long as he satisfied her lust, how could she not completely submit to him? He immediately reached over with his hands. At the same time, two heavenly bodies materialized behind him, each radiating with a formidable aura. He was going to capture Lin Yuqi as quickly as he could. Otherwise, if he looked at this seductive beauty for too long, blood would definitely spurt from his nose. Upon hearing Lin Feng's words, Lin Yuqi immediately realized that she had fallen into his trap. However, this wasn't a hidden trap. Instead, it was an overt trap. They had already humiliated her and Han Xinyan to such an extent, so how could she have held back? Yet, by not being able to hold back, she had fallen into it. She roared softly as she waved her sleeve, sending a boundless divine light toward Lin Feng's large hands. Pung! They exchanged a blow, and shock waves instantly surged through the surroundings, flattening the entire courtyard. Fortunately, this was the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan, meaning that there were powerful formations protecting the city. Otherwise, just this exchange alone would have destroyed the entire Azure Rain city. Lin Yuqi, a battle in the sky. Lin Feng roared. Although there were formations protecting the city, they would still cause significant damage if they fought with their full power. He simply wanted to make this woman his own, not destroy the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan. Right now, Lin Yuqi already had no option but to battle him. She gritted her teeth and flew into the sky after Lin Feng. The two of them continued to exchange blows, moving further and further from the obliterated courtyard. Before long, they had already become two small dots in the sky. Han Xinyan was incredibly worried. Lin Feng was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, while Lin Yuqi was only at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Their strength was on two completely different levels. Thus, it would be impossible for Lin Yuqi to overcome the gap between their power, even if she was a two-star genius. Ling Han immediately sprung into her mind. Although he was only at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, he could definitely improve the situation if he teamed up with Lin Yuqi. Oi, 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 flat-chested beauty, where are you trying to go? Lin Jianya and the four others surrounded Han Xinyan, preventing her from leaving and calling for help. They naturally didn't know that the helper that Han Xinyan wanted to call was actually buried under the rubble. Han Xinyan was fairly astonished. Why hadn't Ling Han shown himself yet? He had been struck by all that falling rubble. She furrowed her beautiful brows, and asked, "What do you people want to do?" "What do we want to do?" Lin Jianya couldn't help but laugh loudly. "Little beauty, you're far too unreserved. You open your mouth, and the first thing that comes out is whether we want to do you or not." How slutty. Han Xinyan's face instantly became as white as a sheet. She clenched her fists and shouted, "Just how shameless can you people be?" Oi, 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 it was him who had spoken just then. "So what's it got to do with us?" the woman from the Hengyun branch said. "In any case, you're the one who's trying to seduce men, yet you still have the face to question the shamelessness of others? I've truly never seen someone as slutty as you. I'm definitely not daring enough to marry such women. However, toying around with them is no problem at all." There was a lewd look on Lin Xiefeng's face. Although Han Xinyan's chest was a bit flat, her appearance was top-notch, enough to make his heart beat in excitement. Anyhow, why were they so daring? The reason behind this was extremely simple. The Hengyun branch was far too weak. The weak were consumed by the strong, and the strong were the ones who ruled. This was the revered truth of the Lin clan. In fact, it was because of this belief that they had grown more and more powerful by the generation. Of course, these people were definitely taking things too far by bullying another branch family on the ancestral grounds. However, they were the Hengyun branch, one of the top 10 branches of the Lin clan. As long as they didn't kill anyone, who would dare to punish them? Moreover, they were only using words to attack others. It wasn't as if they were actually carrying through with their threats or anything. Han Xinyan couldn't take the humiliation any longer, and she immediately drew her sword and charged at the 4 people. She wasn't weak, and her attack instantly forced Lin Xiafeng and the 3 others to retreat. However, her opponents weren't weak either, and they immediately launched a counterattack after finding their footing. Although the 4 major clans of the Treasure Forest Pavilion specialized in alchemy, cultivation was also something that was extremely valued. After all, without the support of cultivation, one wouldn't be able to refine higher-level alchemical pills. Lin Xiafeng and the 3 others were more so prodigies in cultivation. They were all at least 1-star geniuses. If their cultivation levels were equivalent, none of them would be weaker than Han Xinyan. So, with this being the case, how could they be threatened now that they were teaming up against her? Han Xinyan was quickly forced onto her back foot. All she could do was defend with all her might. However, the 4 members of the Hengyun branch were intent on humiliating her. Their strikes weren't fatal, nor did they cause her any severe wounds. However, Han Xinyan's clothes were continuously damaged and sliced off by their attacks. Large swathes of her jade-like skin were revealed. Her hair was also extremely disheveled at this moment. However, they wouldn't dare to kill her here. Everyone was here for the clan competition right now, so if news of them killing a fellow competitor got out, their cultivation would definitely be crippled, even if they weren't sentenced to death. However, having their cultivation crippled was as good as killing them. So, they simply chose to humiliate her. Anyhow, what could she do about this? Anger blazed inside Han Xinyan's eyes. A resolute look flashed across her face, and she suddenly slashed her sword toward her own neck. She couldn't stand this humiliation, so she was going to kill herself in resistance and protest. With her being forced to death by the 4 members of the Hengyun branch, Lin Xiafeng and the others definitely wouldn't get off lightly. Chapter 1368 Drugging the Opponen. Crap. Lin Xiafeng and the others were all astounded. They hadn't imagined that Han Xinyan would actually be so drastic. She had merely suffered some humiliation, yet she was actually going to kill herself. They hurriedly tried to stop her. However, their strength was essentially on the same level, so how could they stop her in time? The sword arrived before Han Xinyan's neck, and Lin Xiafeng and the others all felt their vision go dark as if they were going to faint. Although it was Han Xinyan who would die, their future wouldn't be much brighter. Han Xinyan shut her eyes. She didn't want to look at those 4 disgusting people as she died. Pa! The sword slashed down, yet it didn't cut into Han Xinyan's neck. Instead, a large hand had suddenly shot over and grabbed the blade of the sword. This was a level 8 god tool, yet it was surprisingly unable to cut the skin of the hand that was gripping it. This hand belonged to none other than Ling Han. He had been cultivating in the Black Tower just then, so he naturally hadn't been disturbed by the collapsing buildings. It was only because of Small Tower's warning that he had come out in time and saved Han Xinyan's life. Why have you only come out now? Han Xinyan opened her eyes, and tears involuntarily started to flow down her cheeks when she saw Ling Han. Just how much humiliation had she endured? Did he understand? Ling Han's expression was cold, and he nodded before saying, "Sorry." He took his coat off and wrapped it around Han Xinyan's body. He then turned to face Lin Xiafeng and the 3 others. The expression in his eyes was so cold that it could freeze someone into an ice statue. He didn't have any special feelings for Han Xinyan, and they were just normal friends. However, since she was his friend, he couldn't allow her to be humiliated by any random person. "And who are you?" the woman from the Hengyun branch asked in disdain. Ling Han had restrained his aura, so she naturally couldn't detect Ling Han's true cultivation. "Pa!" Ling Han lashed out with his palm, and one side of the woman's face instantly started to swell and become red. Her once seductive appearance instantly became especially ugly. "You're also a woman, so don't you feel any shame picking on another woman like this? Why you dare to slap me?" The woman instantly jumped in anger as if someone had stepped on her tail. She practiced both alchemy and cultivation, and she was extremely talented in both. Moreover, she was also a beauty who was pursued by many people in her clan. In fact, even her seniors adored her a little too much. Yet, right now, she had actually been slapped by someone. This was unacceptable. "How dare you!" Lin Xiafeng and the other two men all wore dark expressions as they stared at Ling Han. "You've gone too far." "I've gone too far?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You people will understand in a moment what going too far means. Ling Han, Auntie Yu is in danger. You need to hurry over to help her." Han Xinyan hurriedly said. She could envision what would happen if Lin Yuqi was captured. That would be an unbearable fate. Fortunately, even though Lin Feng was more powerful, it would still be fairly difficult for him to capture Lin Yuqi. He wouldn't be able to capture her anytime soon. "This won't take long," Ling Han replied. He immediately charged at Lin Xiafeng and the others. "How arrogant!" Lin Xiafeng and the others roared. They all launched a counterattack. However, how could measly Sun-Moon tier cultivators withstand the might of a heavenly body tier elite? Even someone as prodigious as Ling Han had only been able to challenge elites at the early stage of the low extreme of the heavenly body tier after reaching the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, so how could these weaklings achieve such a feat? "Pa!" Ling Han's strike landed, and his four opponents were all suppressed. Moreover, their clothes were all torn into shreds that flew away like butterflies in the wind. They were stark naked. "Ah!" The woman instantly started to shriek, almost fainting from anger. Although Lin Xiafeng and the two other men didn't shriek, they had also gone as white as a sheet. They had been stripped naked in public. How could they endure this humiliation? However, Ling Han couldn't give a toss about their feelings. With a thought, he sealed their cultivation. He then tied them up and hung them on a long bamboo pole, which he placed outside the entrance of the courtyard. With this, it was extremely likely that everyone on the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan would see their unsightly figures. "Which direction did Madam head in?" Ling Han asked Han Xinyan. Han Xinyan's face was flushed red, and she didn't dare to raise her head at all. Just then, she had accidentally glanced at someone's naked bottom. Fortunately, it was the bottom of that woman. Otherwise, she would definitely have been so disgusted that she wouldn't have been able to eat for half a year. She didn't dare to raise her head, and she simply pointed her finger in some direction. Ling Han immediately leaped into the sky and streaked toward that direction. He activated the star-plucking step, treading on thin air as he dashed forward. The regulations couldn't contain him anymore, and they were instead utilized by him to raise his speed. Meanwhile, he continued to track Lin Yuqi's aura, making sure that he didn't deviate from the right direction. 5,000 kilometers away, Lin Yuqi was currently engaged in an intense battle against Lin Feng. Although her battle prowess was slightly weaker, she possessed an incredibly powerful god Tulla cut of damask woven from the silk of a level 10 demonic beast, the ancient cloud silkworm. It was imbued with extremely powerful divine patterns, which allowed her to unleash battle prowess at the late stage of the medium extreme. However, Lin Feng was also very well prepared. He swallowed and spat a golden pill, and with each cycle of swallowing and spitting, his power would rise explosively. In fact, the power of his attacks had almost reached the high extreme. Fortunately, this power would only last for one trike. When he spat the golden pill out again, his power would fall back to its original level. Otherwise, if his power continued to rise unrestrainedly, there would be no need to battle at all. He would have achieved victory long ago. Even so, Lin Yuqi was still at a disadvantage. However, she was still able to hold on by the skin of her teeth. Lin Feng chuckled coldly. Tangling with Lin Yuqi was only one part of his plan. His true weapon was actually the golden pill that he was swallowing and spitting. He had imbued a strong aphrodisiac into this pill, and as long as one inhaled enough of its aura, they would become as lustful as a wild beast, even if they were a heavenly body tier elite. Moreover, in order not to raise Lin Yuqi's suspicion, he purposefully didn't cleanse the effects of the aphrodisiac from his own body either. Anyhow, this pill was refined by him, so he already had some immunity to it anyway. When Lin Yuqi finally fell victim to him, this aphrodisiac could help bring him more excitement and arousal as well. He would be able to enjoy her with boosted vigor. After battling for a little longer, Lin Yuqi's beautiful face involuntarily flushed red as a cherry blossom. She looked incredibly beautiful and alluring, especially her watery eyes, which were so beautiful that they could hook one's soul. Her beauty was simply intoxicating. Lin Feng laughed heartily, and said, "Ha ha ha ha, Lin Yuqi, obediently submit to me." It was as if he could already see the seductive expression of Lin Yuqi as she lay under him and endured his vigorous punishment. He couldn't help but feel aroused by this, his little body hardening and rising up. Perhaps he was too intoxicated by her beauty, or perhaps this was the effect of the aphrodisiac. Lin Yuqi had only felt a little strange before, yet upon hearing his words, her expression involuntarily changed. "What on earth did you do?" Lin Feng laughed loudly, and replied, "Hee hee, I merely had you inhale some aphrodisiac. It'll only add to the excitement. You're such a sultry woman, so don't tell me that you've never used this before." He felt an intense thirst, and it was as if he were about to burst. Despicable. Shameless. Lin Yuqi's eyes were red, and she didn't tangle with Lin Feng any longer. She immediately turned around and tried to flee. However, how could Lin Feng allow his prey to escape? He hurriedly dashed over to block her path. He was more powerful than her, so it was definitely a simple task to keep her from escaping. Lin Yuqi became increasingly desperate, yet her body started to betray her more and more. Her body was limp and hot, and her eyes were seductive and entrancing. Her lips were also red as fiery flames, and it was as if they were going to consume her with heat. "Ha ha ha ha. I've wanted to fuck you since several thousand years ago. Today, I'm finally going to realize my dream and taste your body." Lin Feng was extremely smug. "Is that so?" A calm voice suddenly traveled into their ears. Chapter 1369 Deal with her yourself. Lin Feng turned around in astonishment, only to see that a young man had suddenly appeared behind him. This young man was currently looking at him with an expression of disdain. Being able to soar in the skies. Heavenly body tier. Such a young lad. He's definitely under 500 years old. Lin Feng was quite astounded. Following the rise in Ling Han's cultivation level, it was becoming more and more difficult to determine his true age. Thus, Lin Feng could only determine that Ling Han was under 500 years old. Even so, this was still enough to stun him. 500 years old. Even in the Lin clan, where there was an endless supply of alchemical pills, the youngest person to reach the heavenly body tier was still at least 100,000 years old. Moreover, this person was already a prodigy among prodigies. Not only that, but they had also come across countless great opportunities. It wasn't as simple as just ingesting alchemical pills. Just alchemical pills alone weren't enough to help one break through the barriers between cultivation levels. One still needed to cultivate and undergo comprehension. Yet, comprehension would require long periods of time. In fact, it would be quite normal to undergo comprehension for tens of thousands of years at a time. Thus, a heavenly body tier elite who was under 500 years old? This was genuinely shocking. However, with lust coursing through his body, he didn't have much willingness to feel shocked. Right now, all he wanted to do was shoo Ling Han away and finally become one with Lin Yuqi. Fuck off, he roared. I don't have a habit of fucking off, Ling Han said calmly. However, his eyes were burning with flames of rage. He was the Alchemy Emperor, so he could easily detect the strong aphrodisiac that had permeated the air. It was clear that Lin Feng had used an underhanded technique. This infuriated him immensely. Against enemies, there should have been no differentiation between male and female. Only one thing should have mattered to kill them. However, regardless of how much animosity Ling Han felt toward his enemies, there was still no way that he would stoop as low as to use such techniques. This was the epitome of shamelessness. You deserve death, Ling Han said. Killing intent burst from his eyes as he suddenly launched a fist at Lin Feng. This fist was imbued with heaven's might, and thus it was as formidable and terrifying as a punishment from heaven. Lin Feng was astonished. This strike was clearly from an elite at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, so why did he feel like he was being punished by heaven? Why was there a flavor of heavenly tribulation? He only had time to raise his arms before his chest before the punch smashed into him. Pung! He was immediately sent flying. He couldn't help but feel stunned. Raising his arms, he saw that there was already a clear depression on his forearm. That was a bone that had been violently snapped by Ling Han's punch. Such a terrifying power. Who on earth are you? Lin Feng asked as he stared at Ling Han. Meanwhile, he continued to channel his origin power to heal the wound on his forearm. His forearm immediately started to return to its normal shape. Of course, this wasn't because he possessed a freakish recovery ability. Rather than that, he was forcefully using his origin power to reset his bones. Once this origin power disappeared, his broken bones would still be just that, broken bones. Ling Han, take me away. Meanwhile, Lin Yuqi was losing more and more control over her body and lust. Her eyes were watery and alluring, and her jade-like skin glowed with a slightly pink tinge. Lin Feng paused for a moment, and an idea instantly popped into his mind. Young man, I'm sure that you also have cravings for this seductive woman. Heh, I can lend her to you. However, when you're done, she belongs to me. What do you say? Rest assured, her mind has already been intoxicated by the 10 intoxication fragrance that I refined. She'll only crave the company of men more and more. In fact, as long as they have a schlong, she won't even mind the company of wild beasts. After you've had your fun, I'll help you clean up the mess. I definitely won't reveal your secret. As he spoke, he continued to shuffle closer to Ling Han. After some time, he suddenly spat out his golden pill before swallowing it again, causing his power to increase tenfold. He launched a fist at Ling Han, and roared, "Ha ha ha ha, I've already planned this for several thousand years, so how can I lend my prey to you?" Just then, he had only made that offer to cloud Ling Han's mind and judgment. He was certain that any man would fall victim to his offer after all. Who could resist such kind of temptation? However, his heart instantly jolted after he threw his punch. This was because Ling Han's expression was frighteningly calm. In fact, it was so cold that it was slightly terrifying. So, this aphrodisiac is actually this potent? I see that you've also inhaled quite the amount. That being the case, you'll probably also enjoy making love with any being that's female, regardless of whether they're beautiful or ugly, human or beast. Ling Han unleashed heaven's might and instantly suppressed Lin Feng's cultivation level by 2 stars. Pung! He met Lin Feng's fist with a punch of his own. After spitting and swallowing his golden pill, Lin Feng's power could just about reach the high extreme. However, now that his cultivation was suppressed by 2 stars, his power had also fallen to something weaker than the late stage of the medium extreme. In other words, his power was almost on the same level as Ling Han's. Thus, he was sent flying by this exchange of punches, while Ling Han was merely pushed back a few steps. Lin Feng was shocked. Was this person truly at the low extreme? How was his power so terrifying? Moreover, what was he trying to say just then? A hint of unease gripped at his heart. Ling Han charged over, unleashing all kinds of secret techniques. After unleashing Tide of the Ages, Lin Feng's attacks were rendered completely harmless. After several exchanges, he was easily captured by Ling Han. However, Ling Han didn't kill him. Instead, he stimulated the effects of the aphrodisiac inside his body. Roar. Lin Feng's eyes became bloodshot as an aura of intense thirst radiated from his body. His eyes were completely fixed on Lin Yuqi. What are you imagining? Fuck off. Ling Han casually flung Lin Feng into the distance. Pang. Lin Feng landed in a forest. Moreover, Ling Han had also sealed most of his power as he had tossed him down. Thus, there was no way that he could fly back over. However, the aphrodisiac in his system had already started to release its powerful effects. Lin Feng's eyes were bloodshot, and he started to chase after the wild beasts in the forest. The wild beasts in this forest were instantly struck by great misfortune. They were frenziedly captured and held down by Lin Feng as he released all of his pent-up lust. However, the effects of the aphrodisiac were far too powerful, so how could be satisfied after just one round? The wild beasts started to flee in terror. Ling Han laughed loudly. This was called becoming the victim of one's own evil deeds. It was obviously impossible to kill members of the Lin clan on their ancestral grounds, and thus this was the most suitable punishment for Lin Feng. It wouldn't be too late to kill Lin Feng if he came across him again in the future. Little brother, give it to me. At this moment, however, Lin Yuqi suddenly latched onto Ling Han, only a hint of clarity remaining in her hazy eyes. However, this clarity was no match for the overwhelming thirst that she was experiencing. Give it to me, sister is yours. No thanks. Ling Han launched a strike and instantly knocked Lin Yuqi unconscious. He then lifted her up and flew away from this place. However, the effects of the aphrodisiac couldn't be dispelled simply by knocking one unconscious. Without sating her lust, Lin Yuqi would only end up burning herself to death with the heat of her lust. Ling Han was incredibly quick, arriving at the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan in no time. He then tossed Lin Yuqi to Han Xinyan. Lin Yuqi had already been controlled by the effects of the aphrodisiac, and her slender body continued to squirm as she let out a series of soft and arousing moans. She was like a beautiful and lustful snake. What's wrong with Auntie you? Han Xinyan asked in astonishment. She was drugged, obviously. Ling Han replied. Bring her into your room and help satisfy her lust. Ah. Han Xinyan's mouth dropped open in shock. Satisfy her? How? Would she have to use the legendary scissoring technique? Ling Han shot a glare at her, and asked, What? Do you want me to sacrifice my body instead? Damned pervert. Han Xinyan's face flushed red as she chided Ling Han. She then hurriedly brought Lin Yuqi into a room. She couldn't let Lin Yuqi lose her purity and chastity, could she? After a short moment, soft and sensual moans started to travel out of the room. These arousing sounds wouldn't stop no matter what. Form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than form, Ling Han recited as he sat outside, guarding the room. He could easily imagine what was going on inside the room right now. These wild imaginations caused his heart to beat in excitement. In fact, he could barely contain his own lust. After an entire day and night, the intoxicating moans finally quieted down. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan both exited the room, their beautiful faces still flushed with an alluring red. Chapter 1370 I'll seduce you forever. Han Xinyan's face was flushed red, and she was too embarrassed to even face Ling Han. However, Lin Yuqi was completely unfazed, and she even made eyes at Ling Han, saying, Little Han, you actually forfeited such a good opportunity. Are you really a man? Although she was chuckling as she spoke, there was a hint of strong competitiveness in her eyes. When Ling Han had rejected her before, she could have taken that as Ling Han being purposefully distant so that he could attract more of her attention. In that case, she could say that he was skilled in his ways and extremely composed. However, after being affected by the aphrodisiac, she had actively sought to make love with Ling Han, yet he had still rejected her. She couldn't tolerate this. Since when had her charm become so ineffective? She couldn't even seduce this young man? She had only been playing around with Ling Han before, yet her competitive spirit had truly been aroused now. She definitely had to subdue the man before her and have him cave into her seduction. Ling Han simply smiled in reply. Love, you actually rejected sister, even when sister was in such a state. That's a great humiliation to sister. Lin Yuqi whispered softly next to Ling Han's ear, and continued, so, sister has decided to seduce you forever. Ling Han couldn't help but shudder. Didn't I simply refuse to make love with you? Is there really any need to go so far? Forget about it, I'll just keep my distance from her in the future. I already have a jealous lover at home. In fact, Empress Wan Xing will definitely become my second jealous lover. Azure Rain City was only so big, and the size of the Lin clan was even more limited. Thus, having caused such a huge commotion here, even going as far as obliterating a courtyard, Lin Feng and the others naturally couldn't keep this conflict a secret. As a result, it wasn't long before everyone heard about Lin Xifeng and the others being stripped naked and hung on bamboo poles. This was something that everyone could have a good laugh about. However, regarding Lin Feng's actions, people grimaced when they heard about it, and they couldn't help but get goosebumps all over their bodies. Who told him to fuck an entire mountain's worth of wild beasts? He didn't discriminate between male and female, and he simply fucked everything that had an orifice. Nothing could escape from his demonic claws. Gasp. Just how pent up and thirsty for action had he been? However, there was no shortage of high-ranking alchemists here, and they quickly concluded that Lin Feng had been affected by a strong aphrodisiac. However, the creator of this aphrodisiac was none other than himself. Everyone was astounded upon hearing this news. What kind of crazy fetish did one need to have in order to feed themselves an aphrodisiac and then go into a mountain full of wild beasts? Lin Feng instantly became a freak among freaks that no one dared to near. This person would even fuck wild beasts, so wouldn't he be even more thirsty and lustful for humans? According to rumors, even the servants who worked at Lin Feng's residence had all run away in fright. For a long period of time after this, the people of Azure Rain City used Lin Feng's name when making promises. If I go back on my promise, then I'll let Lin Feng enter my room tonight. It could be seen from this just how widespread and influential his actions were. Lin Feng obviously didn't have the face to remain. Together with Lin Xifeng and the others, they all left Azure Rain City immediately after being freed. Fortunately, the Hengyun branch was rich with talent and had 10 participants in this competition. Meanwhile, Lin Feng was only one of the leaders of the group. There was still another leader who was in charge of the 6 other young prodigies. Thus, even with Lin Feng and the others' departure, the Hengyun branch still had 6 young prodigies to compete. However, the members of the Hengyun branch still loathed Ling Han and the others to their core, viewing them as mortal enemies. Not even for a second did they reflect on the fact that this was all caused by Lin Feng's provocative actions. The reason for this was simple. The Hengyun branch was powerful, while the Anyuan branch was far too weak. 3 days passed by in a flash, and it was finally the day of the intra-clan competition. This competition would decide which young prodigies could enter the ancient mystery realm. The treasure forest pavilion called this mystery realm the Medicine King's Cave, and it contained a total of 9 levels, each of which was a vast and boundless world. The 100 branches converged, each sending a maximum of 10 young prodigies to compete. Each prodigy would receive their own score, though only the score of the 2 highest scoring prodigies of each branch would be used for the rankings in the end. Based on this ranking, it would then be decided how many members each branch could send into the Medicine King's Cave. Let us examine everyone's age first. The person presiding over this intra-clan competition was Lin Xian, a respected elder and a member of the Biyao branch, the branch currently in control of the ancestral grounds. Although he was only at the heavenly body tier, he had already lived for over 30 million years. He was undoubtedly a very old elder. The young prodigies had their age examined one after another. Through examining their bones, their absolute age could be determined, as could their relative age. Without this age examination, the entire competition would be pointless. After all, the branches could just send any random person to compete in place of the young prodigies. Because they had to be under 30 years old in terms of relative age, the competitors all looked extremely young and full of vigor. However, they weren't all handsome young men and beautiful young women. In fact, there were even a few disabled people among the competitors. Being as weak as the Hengyun branch was, they were naturally close to the end of the line for the age examination. Fortunately, the speed of the examination was extremely quick, meaning that they didn't need to wait for too long. However, there was suddenly a huge stir among the crowd, with astonished shouts sounding from all corners. 724 years old. There's actually a sun-moon tier cultivator who's only 724 years old. Heavens! Did he consume the meat of a true dragon? The speed of his cultivation is insane. That's not the most frightening thing. This person is called Lin Yang, and I've heard that he's a level 8 alchemist. Pooh! Are you serious? Of course. Ling Han also glanced over. This was a young man who looked only 18 or 19 years old. His appearance was innocent, and there was even a hint of bashfulness about him. However, his true age was already over 700 years old. He had probably been cultivating if not refining pills all these years. It was probably because of this that he still maintained a youthful and bashful appearance. Sure enough, this alchemy-oriented clan had a plethora of young talent. This was a sign of their power and potential. It wasn't long before surprised shouts rippled through the crowd again. Another supreme prodigy had appeared, though this person was slightly older, at 1,500 years old. However, his cultivation level was also higher, having already reached the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. Moreover, he was also a level 8 alchemist. This person was called Lin Biyao, and he was a solidly built and extremely rugged man. Although his relative age was very young, he looked more like a middle-aged man over 30 years old. His appearance was incredibly tough and hardy. According to rumors, he was more talented in cultivation than alchemy was a 4-star genius. People thus referred to him as the low extreme saber. Afterward, the appearance of a woman in red sent waves through the entire crowd. She was called Lin Shuiying, and she was a prodigy of the Biyao branch. She was only 200 years old, yet she had already reached the sun-moon tier a few years ago. Moreover, she had already become a level 8 alchemist. Theoretically speaking, her feat should have been impossible. How could one master a high-ranking pill recipe so quickly and easily? However, it was rumored that this woman was extremely peculiar and that she possessed a portion of the memory of some ancestor of the clan. She was astonishingly knowledgeable about alchemy at birth, and it was also because of this that she was able to master a level 8 pill recipe soon after advancing to the sun-moon tier. If it weren't for the constraints of cultivation, perhaps she could even refine level 9 divine pills. Ling Han nodded in understanding. She most likely hadn't been reincarnated. After all, only one reincarnation flower would blossom in the immortal realm every 10 billion years. Thus, even saints would have trouble obtaining such a flower, to say nothing of a branch family of the Lin clan. Anyhow, not every branch family sent young prodigies from their own clan. There were also some branch families that were like the Hengyun branch, having a lack of talented prodigies in their own clan. Thus, they could only call for external help. The Shuiyue branch was one of these branches. The helper that they had enlisted was called Zhang Feng. He was over 500,000 years old, and he had already been renowned for a long time. However, he was at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier, so he satisfied the criteria of being under 1 million years old in terms of absolute age and under 30 years old in terms of relative age. He was also a level 8 alchemist, and he had already studied alchemy for hundreds of thousands of years. He definitely possessed a wealth of experience. Finally, it was Ling Han's turn to have his age examined. Chapter 1371 Prodigy under 500. The age of their bones was determined by a unique formation that could see through their flesh and directly examine their bones. Ling Han walked into the formation. Wang. The formation activated, yet it failed to display his age even after a long time. Huh? What's wrong? Is the formation broken? The cultivators in charge of the formation were all slightly confused. Theoretically speaking, the formation would activate once someone entered it. It would then examine and display their age. However, why was it unresponsive now? Don't channel your origin power to resist the formation, someone immediately chided. If an elite channeled their origin power, they would indeed be able to prevent the examination of the formation. In that case, the formation would naturally lose its ability to determine their age. Ling Han smiled faintly, and asked, "You think I channeled my origin power?" The person who had spoken was only at the mountain river tier, so how could he detect whether a heavenly body tier elite had channeled their origin power or not? Thus, he could only look to the elites of the clan for help. Lin Xian walked over and looked Ling Han up and down. A look of astonishment involuntarily appeared across his face. This young man was actually a heavenly body tier elite. He had actually become a super elite at under 1 million years old. This is a heavenly body tier elite. Show some respect, understand, he roared at the mountain river tier cultivator. Heavenly body tier cultivators could be regarded as elites no matter where they went. Their services were more so welcomed by all forces. The mountain river tier cultivator was given a fright, and he hurriedly started to apologize to Ling Han. Because Ling Han had suppressed his aura, it would be impossible for those under the heavenly body tier to determine his true cultivation. At most, they would only feel that he was slightly profound and mysterious. Ling Han smiled, and said, "It's all right." The formation activated again, yet it was still unable to determine the age of Ling Han's bones. Lin Xian was confused at the start, yet after a short moment, a look of shock immediately spread over his face. As mentioned before, one could prevent the formation from determining their age if they channeled their origin power. However, he could tell that Ling Han wasn't channeling his origin power at this moment. He was confident that he wouldn't make a mistake in determining this. However, the formation was still unable to determine Ling Han's age. What did this signify? This signified that Ling Han's physique was so freakish that it was essentially acting as a barrier of origin power. Moreover, this was a passive ability, something that Ling Han didn't need to control at all. As such, the freakish nature of this ability was even more terrifying. The elder waved his hand, and said, "There's no need to examine his age. I can guarantee that this young man is, definitely under 500 years old." The crowd instantly erupted upon hearing this. 500 years old. Just then, there had been a 700-year-old who had reached the Sun-Moon tier, and a 2,000-year-old who had reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. After them, Lin Shuiying had displayed her even more terrifying talent, reaching the Sun-Moon tier at only 200 years old. The crowd had already been stunned by this. Now, however, this young man had reached the heavenly body tier before 500 years old. Fuck me dead. Is this real? It was widely accepted that there was a huge barrier between the Sun-Moon tier and heavenly body tier. This barrier was extremely difficult to overcome, and it was what separated ordinary cultivators from elites. Moreover, it was only after overcoming this barrier that cultivators could attain the ability of flight and truly roam free among heaven and earth, not being restricted by the regulations of heaven and earth any longer. In any case, reaching the heavenly body tier was a milestone achievement. There was a common saying that it was impossible to reach the heavenly body tier before 1 million years old. Of course, this saying was slightly exaggerated, with many prodigies being able to advance to the heavenly body tier before reaching that age. However, none of them could compare to Ling Han's freakishness. A 500-year-old heavenly body tier elite. No, a heavenly body tier elite who was under 500 years old. Perhaps he was 400 years old, or perhaps he was only 300 years old. The younger his age, the more freakish Ling Han's talent. This was absolutely terrifying. More importantly, he was actually participating in this competition. What did this mean? This meant that he was also talented in the field of alchemy. Otherwise, even if a Genesis tier saint came, they still wouldn't have an advantage, what with the rules and all. Gasp. How can such a freakish person exist in the world? Ling Han smiled at Lin Xian in acknowledgement. Although there was a huge gulf between their cultivation levels, they were still both at the heavenly body tier, after all. Thus, their statuses were still somewhat on the same level. Meanwhile, there was a peculiar glimmer in Lin Xian's eyes as he gazed at Ling Han. Even if this prodigy were clueless in the field of alchemy, he still needed to recruit him into the Biyao branch with his supreme talent. Coupled with their alchemical pills, Ling Han would have a great chance of advancing to the Eternal River tier within 10,000 years. At that time, the Biyao branch would have another Eternal River tier elite, thus solidifying their position as the leader. Although the 4 large clans were all founded upon alchemy, without the support of powerful cultivators, they would merely be reduced to tools who earned money for others. In this world, power was king. I have to recruit him no matter the cost. Lin Xian said in his mind. However, if he could think this, what about the others? They could all see Ling Han's worth, and they all started to formulate plans in their minds. They couldn't miss the opportunity to recruit this genius. In any case, Ling Han was the honorary elder of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, not of the Hengyun branch. That being the case, anyone could still recruit him, no? However, Lin Yuqi wasn't worried at all. One had to realize that she had tried all kinds of methods to seduce Ling Han, yet he had been completely unfazed. Who in the Lin clan could be more womanly and seductive than her? In terms of appearance, she was definitely one of the most beautiful women in the Lin clan. In terms of demeanor, she was more so a bewitching woman who could make men go head over heels for her. In terms of cultivation, she had already advanced to the heavenly body tier. How many people could compare to her? With these 3 qualities, any man should have been entranced and intoxicated by her. Thus, it was sufficient to say that Ling Han wouldn't be moved by beautiful women. Although the Hengyun branch was relatively poor in terms of wealth, they had accumulated treasures for many years, after all. So, it wasn't as if they would be completely out of the equation. Lin Yuqi felt very assured. Ling Han returned to his original position, attracting countless gazes as he did so. He had suppressed his aura before, meaning that no one had known that he was a heavenly body tier elite. Thus, he naturally hadn't attracted much attention. Now, however, it was as if he were bathing under a brilliant halo that made him extremely attractive and dazzling. Many beautiful women gazed at him, loving looks in their eyes. In this world, people respected power. Moreover, Ling Han was still so young, so his future was definitely limitless. In fact, there was even a bright glimmer in Lin Shuaing's eyes. She had always held herself in very high regard, thinking that no man in the world was worthy of her. Right now, however, Ling Han's figure had forcefully entered her heart. Next, let us begin the first round of the competition identifying medicinal ingredients. Lin Xian announced. The competitors all got into position. Members of the same branch family were all separated into different locations to prevent them from cheating. There was a table before Ling Han, and there was a sack resting on this table. However, it was sealed by divine patterns that would shatter if one tried to forcefully scan the contents of the sack with their divine sense. When this candle is lit, you may open the sack before you and begin identifying the medicinal ingredients. Once the candle is exhausted, we'll go around and tally your score. The person who correctly identifies the most medicinal ingredients will win first place and obtain 100 points, Lin Xian explained calmly. However, his voice was clearly projected into everyone's ears. When he finished speaking, he nodded to the person next to him, who immediately lit the candle. The competitors immediately sprung into action, opening the sacks before them. The sacks were spatial spirit tools, meaning that they possessed an extremely large space within them, even though they were only half a person tall. Piles of medicinal ingredients were poured out, and the competitors started to identify them one by one. They would write the name of the medicinal ingredient on a slip of paper and then stick this paper onto the medicinal ingredient. This was a process that they would repeat again and again. In order to correctly identify more medicinal ingredients, people would immediately put aside any medicinal ingredient that they didn't recognize or weren't too sure about. This way, they wouldn't waste any time. The competition ground was extremely quiet, with only the slight rustling sound of medicinal ingredients being picked up and put down. Chapter 1372 Finishing Early. Lin Yang is doing fairly well. Only a third of the time has passed, yet he's already identified over 100,000 medicinal ingredients. He's a prodigy, after all. Lin Biyao is also doing quite well. He's clearly a prodigy in cultivation, yet his achievements in alchemy are also very outstanding. The most impressive person is still that girl, Shuaying. She's almost identified 190,000 medicinal ingredients already. The seniors were all gathered together. Although there was competition between the branches, everyone was the same in hoping that the Lin clan would become more powerful and produce more prodigies. After all, the Treasure Forest Pavilion wasn't owned by just the Lin clan alone. There were still 3 other major clans. With the competition within the Lin clan already so intense, one could easily imagine just how ferocious the hidden competition between the 4 major clans was. If the Lin clan produced a few generations of Alsorans, they would definitely be suppressed and consumed by the 3 other clans. Zhang Feng is also very impressive, someone exclaimed in astonishment. Everyone looked toward Zhang Feng. In terms of age, this external helper was definitely one of the oldest among the competitors. However, with his age came a wealth of experience. He was incredibly calm and smooth as he identified the medicinal ingredients, his hands so fast that they had become a blur. By and large, he could immediately write down the names of the medicinal ingredients with just a single glance. However, no one would put all of their efforts into memorizing medicinal ingredients. After all, the most important round was the last one, where they would refine alchemical pills. Thus, even Zhang Feng couldn't recognize all of the medicinal ingredients. On one side of his table was a pile of medicinal ingredients that he couldn't identify or wasn't too sure about. He's actually no weaker than Shuaying, a few elders exclaimed. Shuaying possesses the memories of an ancestor, so in terms of alchemy alone, she should be peerless among those under 10 million years old. If it weren't for her cultivation level, she could easily become a level 14 alchemist. After all, identifying medicinal ingredients is only the most basic of foundations. It's fine to stop memorizing more medicinal ingredients after reaching a certain level. The most important thing is still one's talent in refining alchemical pills. The seniors all nodded in agreement. Huh! Look at that young man, someone exclaimed as they pointed at Ling Han. The seniors glanced over, and they were all astounded by what they saw. Such incredible speed. Before Ling Han was a small mountain of medicinal ingredients that he had already identified. If he didn't hold them in place with his origin power, it was very likely that they would have spilled everywhere already. There are at least 200,000 medicinal ingredients, someone exclaimed in a trembling voice. Definitely. The seniors were all stunned. His speed was even quicker than Lin Shuaying's, and this was something that they couldn't accept. One had to realize that Lin Shuaying wasn't competing by herself. She had fused the skull of a Lin clan ancestor into her body, and thus obtained all of that ancestor's alchemy knowledge. In other words, she had hundreds of millions of years of experience on the other competitors. Who could compare to her? If he isn't messing around, then his ability to identify medicinal ingredients is simply terrifying. Everyone nodded in agreement. Of course, it was also possible that Ling Han had a shocking error rate in his identification. If that were the case, it would be useless even if he identified 2 million medicinal ingredients, to say nothing of identifying just 200,000 ones. Ling Han was lightning quick in his identification. His divine sense was immensely powerful, and he was able to identify 100 medicinal ingredients at once. Of course, he could also use his divine sense to control his pen and write down the names of the medicinal ingredients. In his eyes, there were only two types of medicinal ingredients, those that he recognized and those that he didn't. There definitely didn't exist any medicinal ingredient that he was unsure about. Thus, the pile of medicinal ingredients that he couldn't identify was almost just as large as the pile of medicinal ingredients that he had identified. Ling Han stopped identifying more medicinal ingredients when the candle burned down to 1/3 of its length. He had already identified close to 360,000 types of medicinal ingredients. This was also all of the medicinal ingredients that he had learned about and memorized. On the other side of the table was a pile of almost just as many medicinal ingredients. These were the medicinal ingredients that he had never seen before. He had clearly learned and memorized 400,000 types of medicinal ingredients, so why had he only identified 360,000? This was because the other 40,000 were all incredibly rare and valuable medicinal ingredients. As such, how could the Lin clan provide everyone with these medicinal ingredients? In any case, was 700,000 medicinal ingredients still not enough? Even if they could gather all 810,000 types of medicinal ingredients, it would simply be impossible for anyone to identify all of them within the time limit. Of course, this was apart from the freak, Ling Han. He still had 1/3 of the time remaining, yet there were already no more medicinal ingredients for him to identify. As for those that he couldn't recognize, there was nothing more he could do. "I'm done. You can come over and check them now," Ling Han said. Those who were still diligently identifying the medicinal ingredients almost fell off their chairs in shock upon hearing this. In fact, the slowest person had only just identified a little over 10,000 medicinal ingredients. It could be said that they had only made an inch of progress. However, Ling Han was already done. Was he trying to frighten them to death? Even Lin Shuiying, Lin Yang, and the others shuddered in astonishment. Their concentration and emotional state were all somewhat affected. Meanwhile, Zhang Feng was still as calm and composed as always. His hands were incredibly steady. The seniors were all a little flustered. They had held this competition numerous times before, yet no one had ever finished identifying all of the medicinal ingredients within the time limit before. Thus, they only came to their senses and retrieved Ling Han's table after faltering for a moment. They naturally put all of the unidentified medicinal ingredients back into the sack. They then started to check the remaining medicinal ingredients in curiosity. Correct, correct, correct. The 12 or so seniors checked together, so their speed was naturally very quick. However, the shock on their faces became more and more evident. This was because Ling Han had not made a single mistake. After a long while, they finally finished examining all of the 360,000 medicinal ingredients. Not a single one had been incorrectly identified. The seniors looked at each other, and they could all see the look of disbelief in each other's eyes. One had to realize that Ling Han had finished identifying the medicinal ingredients before the time limit had run out. Moreover, he was still under 500 years old. In other words, he definitely hadn't spent a long time learning and memorizing medicinal ingredients. If he was given another 500 years, how many medicinal ingredients would he be able to identify? 500,000? 600,000? 700,000? Gasp! What a freak! They had already wanted to recruit Ling Han before, but their desire to recruit him was naturally 100-fold more intense now. Although identifying medicinal ingredients didn't correlate to one being a freakish alchemist, Ling Han's freakish abilities still meant that he was worthy of heavy investment and nurturing. The candle finally extinguished, and everyone stopped what they were doing. Meanwhile, people started to walk around and tally the results. The Beisha branch had gathered many people for this task, and thus they were able to tally the results of all the competitors in just a few hours. First place goes to Lin Shuaying. She identified a total of 470,000 medicinal ingredients, making a total of 19 mistakes, Lin Xian announced. Commotion swept through the crowd as this was announced. This was absolutely incredible. She had actually identified 470,000 medicinal ingredients. Moreover, she had only misidentified 19 of them. As expected of a prodigy who had been rumored to receive the memories of an alchemy grandmaster. Lin Shuaying tilted her head up in pride. This result was well within her expectations. This was just how impressive she was. Second place goes to Zhang Feng. He identified a total of 380,000 medicinal ingredients, making a total of 297 mistakes, Lin Xian continued to announce. There was excited chatter in the crowd. This was also very impressive. Although Zhang Feng was older, how could he compare to someone who had received the memories of an alchemy grandmaster? Third place goes to Ling Han. He identified a total of 360,000 medicinal ingredients, not making a single mistake. Pooh! Everyone spluttered in shock. Not a single mistake. Oi, that's far too shocking, no? Moreover, Ling Han had finished his identification with 1/3 of the time remaining. Not only that, but he was also under 500 years old. If he was given another 500 years, wouldn't he be able to flawlessly identify 720,000 types of medicinal ingredients? Such a freak actually existed in the world? Lin Shuaying couldn't help but swallow her pride and glanced at Ling Han. Only this kind of prodigy was worthy of becoming her partner. Chapter 1373 Worthy of being called Grandmaster. Although Lin Shuaying had won first place in the first round of the intra-clan competition, Ling Han had been the most eye-catching individual. When everyone's score was confirmed, the second round of the competition immediately began. The content of this round was still identifying medicinal ingredients, though the difficulty had been raised, with the competitors required to identify jumbled medicinal ingredients. A large number of medicinal ingredients would be cut up and mixed together, and the competitors would have to identify what medicinal ingredients were present in each mixture. This process would be repeated 30 times, and each mixture would contain approximately 200 or so medicinal ingredients. Just like before, Ling Han was the quickest to complete the identification. However, he was at a disadvantage in that he only knew 400,000 of the foundation medicinal ingredients. This was only half of the total foundation medicinal ingredients. Thus, his answers could only be half correct as well. This accuracy wasn't high. However, in terms of speed, he was more than twice as quick as Lin Shuaying, who had finished after him. This was a clear representation of just how freakishly talented he was when it came to identifying medicinal ingredients. After 30 rounds of identification, Ling Han's results weren't among the best. However, he still managed to squeeze into the top 10. After all, there was still a time limit imposed on this round. If the competitors were given as much time as they needed, Ling Han would perhaps drop out of the top 100. This time, first place went to Lin Shuaying again, earning another 100 points for the Beisha branch. Her total score was now an impressive 200. Meanwhile, second place went to Lin Biyao. Although his appearance was wild and rugged, he was actually surprisingly refined and attentive. Sure enough, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Ling Han had earned 97 points in the first round, and he had now earned 91 points in the second round. Thus, his total score quite high. Meanwhile, Han Xinyan's results were much worse than his. She had only earned 11 points in the first round, and this had improved to 14 points in the second round. In total, she had only earned 25 points. The third round of the competition involved reconstructing medicinal ingredients. It was not reconstructing one medicinal ingredient, but reconstructing hundreds of medicinal ingredients that had been sliced up and mixed together. Ling Han was still the quickest competitor, yet just like before, his recognition of only half of all medicinal ingredients held him back again. He earned 8th place and received 92 points. First went to Lin Shuaying again. She had already come first in all 3 rounds. However, Lin Yuqi was still extremely confident. Although Lin Shuaying had already won the first 3 rounds, the 4th round was weighted differently from the first 3 rounds. It was the most important round, so it was given 50% of the total weighting of the entire competition. Thus, as long as Ling Han won first place in the 4th round, and Lin Shuaying performed slightly worse, then Ling Han would overtake her and obtain the first place overall. Just thinking about this made her excited. Her slender body couldn't help but heat up slightly. She yearned to be embraced by that man, and she yearned for him to passionately kiss her, to massage her shapely breasts, and to pay. She hurriedly stopped her thoughts from running wild. She was actually daydreaming about a man? Had she taken the wrong medicine? After the 3rd round, the competitors had a few hours to rest. Refining pills required extreme concentration, and no mistake or distraction could be tolerated. Begin. Lin Xian announced. He was still in charge of overseeing the competition. What alchemical pill each competitor refined was completely up to them. However, their final ranking would be largely dependent on the level of the alchemical pill that they refined. If 2 people refined alchemical pills of the same level, then their ranks would be determined by the refining difficulty of the pills. If even this was identical, then their ranks would be determined by the quality of the alchemical pill. For example, if 2 competitors both refined level 8 alchemical pills, then the person who refined a berserk blood spirit pill would definitely come out on top. After all, this was the saintly pill of the sun-moon tier, with only level 9 alchemical pills being more valuable. Ling Han swept his gaze over the competitors. Apart from him, no other competitor was at the heavenly body tier. Thus, theoretically speaking, no one else could refine level 9 divine pills. Of course, there might also be exceptions. For example, Ling Han had reached the pinnacle level before, and he also practiced the indestructible heaven scroll. In addition, his divine sense was also incredibly powerful. Thus, he had been able to just barely refine level 9 divine pills while still at the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. However, such a freak probably didn't exist here. Ling Han didn't push his luck and try to refine a level 9 alchemical pill. After all, he had never tried to refine a level 9 alchemical pill before. Instead, he chose to refine the berserk blood spirit pill. In any case, this alchemical pill could definitely help him win first place. Boom! Fire soared from his cauldron. Because some people had performed poorly in the previous rounds, they decided to go all out in this round, choosing to refine alchemical pills that were well beyond their ability. The result, naturally, was their cauldrons exploding in spectacular fashion. Each competitor would only get 1 chance, so failure meant the end to their competition. Most people were only level 5 or level 6 alchemists, so they finished refining their alchemical pills in just 2 or 3 days. 5 days passed, and only 100 or so people were still refining their pills. 10 days passed, and this number dropped to just 9 people. As long these 9 people successfully refined their pills, the top 9 places would definitely go to them. The reason for this was very simple. The higher the rank of an alchemical pill, the longer it would take to refine. It was a shame that on the 12th day, someone's cauldron still exploded with a boom. All their previous efforts went up in a puff of smoke. This competitor was so aggrieved that they coughed up 3 liters of blood. In fact, they almost fainted in grief. Half a month passed, and the 8 remaining competitors all finished refining their alchemical pills one after another. They were all brimming with confidence, certain that the alchemical pill that they had refined would definitely win them first place. Judging by the time taken to refine the pills, all 8 of them had refined level 8 alchemical pills. Thus, their rankings would be determined by who had refined the more difficult pills. Lin Biyao has successfully refined the entering void pill. Lin Xian announced. Expressions of grief and dejection instantly appeared on the faces of 3 competitors. Their alchemical pills were inferior to Lin Biyao's. They were all alchemists, so they naturally understood which alchemical pills were easier to refine and which were more difficult to refine, even without a judge. Thus, they could determine whether they had won or lost simply by looking at their competitors' alchemical pills. However, Lin Shuiying, Lin Yang, and Zhang Feng were all unfazed. It was clear that they were still brimming with confidence. Lin Yang has successfully refined the dark shade pill. Lin Biyao and Lin Yang instantly exchanged a glance, their eyes as piercing as swords. An aura of fierce competition burned between them. The pills that they had refined were identical in both level and difficulty. As such, their rankings would be determined by the quality of their pill. Zhang Feng has successfully refined the Raging Flame True pill. Zhang Feng smiled faintly. In terms of difficulty, the Raging Flame True pill was on the same level as the Entering Void pill and the Dark Shade pill. In terms of quality, he had been immersed in alchemy for over 500,000 years, so how could he not defeat a few inexperienced youths? Lin Shuiying has successfully refined the Turbid Sky pill. Boom! Shock waves instantly swept through the entire crowd. Everyone was stunned to the spot. This was the Turbid Sky pill. The difficulty of refining this pill was manyfold that of refining the Dark Shade pill and other pills. Lin Shuiying wore a proud smile. Just as she had predicted before the competition, she would win first place in all 4 rounds of the competition. She would become the undisputed champion of this competition. Finally, Lin Xian arrived before Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly as he removed the lid of his cauldron. A blood-red streak instantly soared from his cauldron, its speed astonishingly quick. Lin Xian's reflexes were incredible, and his hand immediately shot out and grabbed the red dot. There was a stunned expression on his aged face. This alchemical pill was showing signs of developing a spirit. Alchemists all knew that alchemical pills could only develop a spirit after transcending level 10. For alchemical pills under level 10, they would only be able to develop a spirit if they were the saintly pill of their level. What alchemical pill is this? The senior alchemists asked as they shuffled over. Their brows were all raised in astonishment. It wasn't long before someone exclaimed in astonishment, "Berserk! Blood Spirit Pill." Although the recipe for this alchemical pill had already been lost, there were still refined pills that had been passed down until now. This was an alchemical pill that was hailed as the small saintly pill. It truly is the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. Heavens! The fact that he can refine the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill means that he's already capable of becoming a level 9 alchemist. He's worthy of being regarded as a Grandmaster. Just like the heavenly body tier in cultivation, becoming a level 9 alchemist was a huge barrier in the field of alchemy. Advancing to this level was tremendously difficult. Moreover, in the eyes of high-ranking alchemists, only alchemists at or above level 9 were worthy of being called Grandmaster. Their eyes were all blazing with fervent excitement as they gazed at Ling Han. Chapter 1374 Who is this retard? This was far too astonishing. A quasi-level 9 alchemist who was under 500 years old. Although Lin Shuiying was only 200 years old, there was no way that she could become a level 9 alchemist if she didn't break through to the heavenly body tier, and if she couldn't become a level 9 alchemist within 300 years, there was no way that she could compare to Ling Han. Of course, this comparison was because they still didn't know Ling Han's true age. If they knew that he wasn't even 50 yet, they would definitely go completely numb with shock. First place goes to Ling Han. Lin Xian announced. There was no doubt about this result, nor was there any objection. Who dared to claim that they had refined an alchemical pill more difficult than the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill? However, because Lin Shuiying had won first place in the first 3 rounds, she still managed to claim first place overall, even though she had come second in this last round, and even though this last round weighted far more than the first 3 rounds. Ling Han could only settle for second. However, no one believed that Ling Han was genuinely less capable than Lin Shuaing. He had only come second because he was still too young. Moreover, he hadn't obtained the memory of some ancient alchemy grandmaster and whatnot. Otherwise, judging by his impressive performance throughout the first 3 rounds, his results could have definitely been even better. Although Lin Yuqi felt that it was a shame that Ling Han couldn't claim the first place, she was still very satisfied with his results. This was already enough. Ling Han had claimed the second place. This was enough to secure the Anyuan branch a whopping 99 spots to enter the Medicine King's cave. After returning to their courtyard, Lin Yuqi couldn't suppress her excitement any longer. She immediately leaped into Ling Han's arms and said, "Handsome little brother, we've accomplished our mission. How about a kiss?" She puckered her alluring red lips. Upon seeing that Ling Han was unfazed, a thought suddenly occurred to her, and she suddenly slapped her own bottom. Pa! There was a crisp crack as her shapely bottom undulated in a mesmerizing and intoxicating manner. Bewitching. She was far too bewitching. Auntie! Han Xinyan exclaimed in complete and utter embarrassment. She hurriedly dragged Lin Yuqi away. In the beginning, Lin Yuqi had tried to set her up with Ling Han. Now, she was trying to make Ling Han become her uncle. What on earth was she playing at? Ling Han knew that he couldn't endure this for much longer. He was a normal man, and his willpower to resist beautiful women was only so strong. He returned to his room and hurriedly entered the Black Tower. He then tangled passionately with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Only then did he rid Lin Yuqi's mesmerizing and seductive figure from his mind. In the future, everything would be solved with Empress Luan Xing by his side. She was the most charming and attractive woman, and a single glance at her would allow him to view all other beauties as ordinary women. After 3 days, Lin Yuqi couldn't help but press Ling Han to set off. They couldn't not leave. People came one after another, all trying to recruit Ling Han and persuading him to leave the Anyuan branch. It was as if they could agree to any condition as long as Ling Han agreed to join their branch family. For example, the Beisha branch had even offered to betroth Lin Shuaing to Ling Han. However, the condition was that Ling Han had to join the Beisha branch first. Although Lin Yuqi believed in Ling Han's self-control, she was still worried that his willpower would weaken with time. After all, perhaps 1 or 2 beauties couldn't compete against her charm and seduction. However, what about 10? Or 100? It was best to leave as soon as possible. The 3 of them set off on their return journey. Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan would return to the Anyuan branch first. There was still half a year until the Mystery Realm opened, and this wasn't a very long time. During this half a year, they would pick 99 suitable branch members to enter the Mystery Realm. Of course, one of these spots was already reserved for Ling Han. Ling Han and the 2 women agreed on a place to meet. After arriving there, Ling Han entered the Black Tower and continued to immerse himself in the world of medicinal ingredients, improving his identification ability. Time quietly crept by. It wasn't long before half a year flashed by. Ling Han finally exited the Black Tower in satisfaction. He had already memorized all 810,000 types of medicinal ingredients. Even if someone were to slice up and mix all of these medicinal ingredients together, he would still be able to separate and reconstruct them. Moreover, his speed would be insane. If they were to hold the intra-clan competition again, he would definitely become the undisputed champion, winning first place in all of the events. Moreover, his victories would be resounding and crushing. 3 more days passed, and Lin Yuqi finally arrived. This time, it wasn't just her and Han Xinyan. Instead, she was leading a large cohort of people. Counting them carefully, there was a total of 99 people, including Ling Han. In other words, these were the people who had been chosen to enter the Medicine King's cave. Moreover, apart from Lin Yuqi, there was still another heavenly body tier elite among this group. He looked to be under 30 years old, and his face was a picture of pride and haughtiness. It was as if he believed that he was number 1 in the world. "You're Ling Han?" that person asked in a condescending tone. There was a hint of disdain in his voice, and he said, "Don't think that you're a hero just because you won all these spots for the Hengyun branch. A servant is a servant, after all. Don't let your ego get to your head." Holy fuck. It's a retard. Before Ling Han could even reply, he was quickly dragged aside by Lin Yuqi. However, a look of displeasure instantly spread across that person's face when he saw this. "Who's that dumb C***NT?" Ling Han asked. "Just ignore him," Lin Yuqi hurriedly replied. "He's called Lin Zihong, and he's the son and only child of our branch leader. Although he's not very talented in alchemy, he's a very talented cultivation prodigy. He's already reached the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier after cultivating for just 600,000 or so years." Ling Han didn't think much of this. Only at the medium extreme? He could suppress him with a single hand. "I know you're powerful," Lin Yuqi said with a sweet smile. "However, don't drag yourself to the same level as him. He's merely jealous after hearing about your brilliant feats." Ling Han humphed and said, "Are you sure that he's merely jealous about my feats?" Lin Zihong was clearly interested in Lin Yuqi, yet this bewitching woman was now sticking closer to him than ever. Thus, it was inevitable that Lin Zihong would feel extremely jealous. In reality, Ling Han was the victim of all this mess. In any case, just ignore him. Lin Yuqi put on a delicate and fragile demeanor, and said, "Just listen to me, okay? Just pretend that I'm begging you, okay?" Ling Han couldn't endure this, and he immediately left with a flick of his sleeves. He entered the carriage and closed his eyes. Without seeing or hearing them, he wouldn't feel annoyed. Lin Yuqi smiled faintly. Although Ling Han always treated her with mock disgust, he still treated her as a friend. Otherwise, with his strength and personality, he would definitely beat Lin Zihong into a true retard. This time, there wasn't just one carriage. Instead, there was a line of carriages that carried the 99 people. These carriages slowly rocked their way to the ancestral grounds in Azure Rain City again. Almost all of the 100 branch families had arrived again, with one of the branch families only sending one person to participate. This wasn't because they couldn't find more people, but rather because they had only won one spot to enter. Who told them to achieve the worst results? Meanwhile, the Hengyun branch, which had been in the last place before, had won the second place this time, thus allowing them to secure 99 spots. This naturally surprised many people. Lin Zihong wore a haughty expression as if all of this was his doing. Like a peacock spreading his plumage, he was as ostentatious as could be. However, regardless of how showy he was, few people were willing to interact with him. Instead, an endless stream of people went to visit Ling Han, even though he stayed in his own room most of the time. This caused Lin Zihong's eyes to go red with jealousy. He's nothing but a small alchemist. What does he have to be proud of? Lin Zihong was extremely bitter, feeling vexed that Ling Han was stealing attention away from him. "Seventh uncle, just let that brat be arrogant for now. When we enter the Medicine King's cave in a few days' time, we'll find a chance to secretly dispose of him." "What do you say?" a lackey suggested. Lin Zihong's eyes lit up, and he said, "That's a good idea. I can make an excuse and separate us into two groups, saying that we'll be able to come across more opportunities this way. I'll put him into my group and then find an opportunity to dispose of him." "Exactly. Seventh uncle, you're an elite at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, while that person is only at the low extreme. Moreover, he's only at the early stage of the low extreme. He's nothing compared to you," the lackey continued in an obsequious voice. "You even dare to flirt with the woman that I like. You're simply seeking death." Lin Zihong spat in a sinister voice. Chapter 1375 Purple Jade 9 Dao Tree. Once upon a time, Azure Rain City had actually been an uninhibited mountain range. However, at some point in time, the four major clans had decided to settle in this place. After countless years of development, this place had finally become a holy land for alchemy that attracted countless alchemists from all corners of the world. As for the specific reason, it was because the entrance to the Medicine King's cave lay in this piece of land. Moreover, it was in order to hide the treasure forest pavilion's true foundation that Azure Rain City was built. Who could imagine that there existed the entrance to an ancient mystery realm under this city? Ling Han and Zhang Feng were both asked to vow to never reveal the secret of the Medicine King's cave to others. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed to enter. Afterward, several mighty beings appeared. These were Eternal River tier elites, and they used precious treasures to open the entrance to the Medicine King's cave. Countless years ago, the ancestors of the 4 major clans had obtained the key to the Medicine King's cave. It was also because of this that the Treasure Forest Pavilion had been founded. The entrance shimmered into being. This was a revolving light door, and only those who satisfied the entry conditions were allowed to enter. Otherwise, they would be rejected by the light door. At least even Eternal River tier elites weren't able to force their way inside. From this, it could be discerned that the owner of this Medicine King's cave had at least been a Genesis tier saint. Moreover, taking into account the fact that the inheritances in the Medicine King's cave were all alchemical pills, it could be determined that the owner of this cave had at least been a level 17 alchemist. His inheritances were naturally extremely precious. Of course, it wasn't only the Lin clan that was entering the mystery realm right now. The 3 other major clans of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were also entering. According to the rules of the 4 major clans, the Han clan would enter first this time, followed by the Lin clan, and then finally the Shi clan and the Huang clan. When it was the Lin clan's turn to enter, everyone entered in groups. The first group to enter was naturally the Beisha branch. After all, they had won first place in the intra-clan competition. The second group to enter was the An Yuan branch. This branch was led by Lin Zihong, who had a look of haughtiness on his face at this moment. It was as if the entire world were bowing before him. Xiao! Ling Han felt a tug on his body, and before he knew it, he had already arrived in some unfamiliar place. This was a completely new world, where the air was suffused with the fragrance of medicines. This was the first level of the Medicine King's cave. Gazing around, he could see that this level was filled with rolling hills that were lush with medicinal plants. There were many people pacing back and forth among the medicinal fields, meticulously caring for the medicinal plants. There are, actually, people in this place? Wait, no. Ling Han immediately shook his head. He activated his eye of truth and observed the people more carefully. In fact, these weren't people at all, but instead a population of puppets. It was just that their appearance and demeanor were almost identical with real humans. Lin Yuqi appeared beside Ling Han, and explained, the Medicine King's cave has 9 levels, and each level has a supremely valuable medicine. However, this valuable medicine is incredibly difficult to obtain. This is because of the puppets that guard it. We're only allowed to enter this mystery realm once every 100,000 years, so we have to rely on these puppets to maintain the medicine fields. Thus, we definitely can't damage them. In other words, we have to obtain the supremely valuable medicine without hurting the puppets. This is a tremendously difficult task. Ling Han nodded in understanding. If they obliterated all of these puppets, obtaining the medicines would naturally be easy. However, that would be killing the goose that laid the golden egg. Were they going to harvest the medicines once and never return again? The 4 major clans had strict rules in place, stating that those who entered the mystery realm were not allowed to damage the puppets that guarded the medicine fields. This was an intelligent and far-sighted rule. However, the highest level that we've reached is only the 8th level. As for the 9th level, no one has ever been able to enter it before, Lin Yuqi continued. Judging from the medicines of the first 8 levels, the 9th level definitely contains a pill recipe for a saint pill. After reaching level 17, alchemical pills could be called saint pills. Yuqi, in order to raise our efficiency, how about we lead a team each and each go our own way? Lin Zihong immediately suggested. He had already endured for a long time, and he was already nearing the limits of his patience. He didn't want to see the detestable Ling Han any longer. Lin Yuqi couldn't wish for a better idea, so she immediately nodded in agreement. Lin Zihong pointed at Ling Han and ordered, "You, follow me." "No way," Lin Yuqi hurriedly said. "He's my person, so he's got to follow me." Flames of fury blazed in Lin Zihong's heart. "Oh, you two merely had a trip together, and yet he's already your person?" He humphed and said, "Don't forget what the branch leader said before we left. I'm the leader of this trip." Lin Yuqi shook her head in her mind. She naturally understood what Lin Zihong was planning to do. In fact, she was actually trying to save him. Ling Zihong naturally didn't know that Ling Han had even defeated Lin Feng with ease before. Moreover, Lin Feng's strength was definitely no weaker than Lin Zihong's. "It's my choice who I follow or don't follow," Ling Han said calmly. "I'm merely an honorary elder, but none of you can control me. Since we've entered this place, let's each go our own way." After saying this, he immediately dashed forward, activating the star-plucking step and disappearing into the distance. He was as quick as lightning. Because of his relationship with Lin Yuqi, he decided to give her face and avoid conflict with Lin Zihong again. However, he wouldn't tolerate the same threat 3 times. If Lin Zihong was insistent on seeking death, he wouldn't mind being merciless and granting his wish. Lin Yuqi couldn't help but sigh in her mind. She knew that Ling Han was incredibly powerful. Thus, with him present, they would definitely be able to obtain a significantly more bountiful yield. However, who told Lin Zihong to be such a petty and narrow-minded person? This is a good outcome too. At least they won't clash with each other again. "Coward," Lin Zihong said with a sneer. Since Ling Han had fled, there was no point splitting into 2 groups anymore. However, how could Lin Yuqi agree to this? In any case, it was Lin Zihong who had suggested splitting into 2 groups anyway. Eventually, they still ended up splitting into 2 groups. Lin Shuaying and her branch members weren't far away, and upon seeing this, a confident smile immediately appeared on her face. She wouldn't mind taking advantage of their weakness and capturing Ling Han. After throwing down some words, she hurriedly left to pursue Ling Han. However, how quick was Ling Han? Moreover, she had only just advanced to the Sun-Moon tier. So, how could she catch up to him? In the blink of an eye, she had already lost track of Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han continued to scan the medicine fields below him as he flew forward. If they were only ordinary godly medicines, he wouldn't waste his time harvesting them. After all, there was already a huge amount of these godly medicines in the Black Tower. After a few hours, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. A tree that was almost 30 meters tall had appeared before him. This tree was as dazzling and crystal-like as an emerald, and its trunk was a peculiar purple-red in color. Moreover, the crown of this tree opened up like an umbrella, making it appear extremely attractive and beautiful. Of course, it wasn't the peculiar nature of this tree that stopped Ling Han in his tracks. Rather, it was because this tree was an extremely rare level 10 divine tree. This was the purple jade 9 Dao tree. This type of divine tree was extremely peculiar. In the beginning, it would blossom and produce fruits in 1,000,000 years. However, these fruits would only be level 2 godly medicine. Following this, it would blossom after another 2,000,000 years. However, at that time, the fruits would be level 3 godly medicines. Then, its fruits would reach level 4 after 4,000,000 years, and then level 5 after 8,000,000 years. Eventually, the fruits would become level 10 godly medicine after some 200,000,000 years. At each stage, the trunk of the purple jade 9 Dao tree would be of a different color. Only after blossoming 9 times would its trunk become purple-red. Afterward, it would blossom and produce fruits once every 200,000,000 years, for a total of 9 times. After 9 times, the purple jade 9 Dao tree would wilt and die. It was because of this that the divine tree was called the purple jade 9 Dao tree. This was a level 10 divine tree, so the fruits that it bore were naturally level 10 divine fruits. Right now, the divine tree was full of fruits that still appeared a little unripe. Perhaps it would take several million years for these fruits to ripen. However, to Ling Han, uprooting this tree and planting it into the Black Tower was the best way to go. Fortunately, I left by myself. Otherwise, that bewitching woman would definitely stop me from uprooting this tree, Ling Han said with a smile. The Medicine King's cave was only discovered by the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and it's not as if they actually owned this place, so I won't be going too far by uprooting and taking this tree. Chapter 1376 Divine Sword Developing a Spiri. In Ling Han's eyes, the Treasure Forest Pavilion was simply occupying this place. They definitely weren't the owner of this place. For example, they would have to avoid the puppets if they wanted to harvest any of the medicinal plants. However, if they were the true owner of this place, would they need to go through so much trouble? Moreover, to me, any puppet is a gift, Ling Han said with a chuckle as he gazed at the humanoid puppet below the divine tree. I wonder how powerful this puppet is. This was practically a gift for him. Puppets didn't possess a conscious mind, so they could be easily absorbed into the Black Tower. They wouldn't be able to resist even if they possessed power at the Genesis tier unless they had developed intelligence. Ling Han flew down and arrived before the tree. The puppet that was caring for the divine tree was immediately alarmed, and it instantly charged toward Ling Han at an astonishing speed. Ling Han didn't immediately activate the Black Tower. Instead, he exchanged a strike with the puppet, testing the puppet's strength. Pang! Ling Han was instantly sent flying. A cloud of blood sprayed from his body, dyeing his clothes a light shade of red. Such formidable power! Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. The power of this puppet had already reached the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Thus, it naturally possessed a crushing advantage over him. It pushed him back with a single strike, even causing his godly bones to groan and quiver as if they were going to fall apart. The puppet naturally wouldn't feel any emotion, and it dashed toward Ling Han with a single step, launching another attack to deal the killing blow. Enough! Ling Han waved his hand, and his divine sense instantly enveloped the puppet. Xiao! With a thought, the puppet disappeared from before him. In the Black Tower, Ling Han was God. He easily dismantled the powerful puppet. To his delight, he found that over 70% of the puppet was made from godly metal. So much godly metal. I'm rich, I'm rich. Ling Han decided that even if he didn't obtain any pill recipe, he would still capture all of the puppets level 8 and above in this mystery realm. He would extract the godly metal from their bodies and feed it to his divine demon sword. However, the most important task right now was to uproot this purple jade 9 Dao tree and place it into the Black Tower. In fact, this was a fairly simple task. Ling Han used his hand like a shovel, easily uprooting the divine tree along with a large chunk of soil with his overwhelming power. He then absorbed it into the Black Tower and planted it down. With this done, the purple jade 9 Dao tree truly belonged to him now. Let's continue. Ling Han said in excitement. Right now, his main goal was to raise the quality of the divine demon sword. He continued forward. This mystery realm was brimming with medicine fields, and there was certainly no shortage of puppets. However, Ling Han didn't capture them indiscriminately. Instead, he carefully examined them, only capturing those whose power had reached the heavenly body tier. Power at the heavenly body tier meant that these puppets definitely contained level 9 godly metal inside them. If the power of the puppets didn't meet this criterion, he would leave them alone, allowing them to continue their menial tasks of caring for the medicinal plants. He was only leaving these puppets alone because of his relationship with Lin Yuqi. After all, it was because of her that he had the opportunity to enter this mystery realm. A person shouldn't forget the goodwill of others. Even so, he still captured and dismantled many puppets. Moreover, godly medicines that were guarded by such powerful puppets were all at least level 8 godly medicines. Ling Han was giddy with joy as he harvested these godly medicines. When members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion entered this mystery realm, they would all strictly abide by the rules. They wouldn't harvest any medicinal ingredient that was unripe. However, Ling Han didn't have any such worries. After placing the medicinal ingredients into the Black Tower, they would only grow quicker and better. There would be no waste at all. He continued to capture puppets and harvest godly medicines, and he continued to dismantle the puppets and feed godly metal to the divine demon sword. Because the 4 major clans had already occupied this mystery realm for hundreds of millions of years, they had already compiled very detailed information about all of the levels, apart from level 9. The map that they had produced was also very complete and accurate. Using this map, Ling Han spent about 10 days visiting all of the locations that had valuable godly medicines. The map in his hand clearly marked which location had godly medicines of what level. In fact, even the years to maturity was clearly labeled beside the locations. This was the culmination of many years of hard work and careful exploration by the previous generations of the 4 major clans. Right now, the only place left to visit was the shrine that connected the first level of the mystery realm to the second. He had already visited all of the other places that were worth visiting. The divine demon sword should be able to level up now, right? Right now, the divine demon sword had already grown back to its original size. Ling Han retrieved a piece of level 9 godly metal and fed it to the divine demon sword. When this piece of godly metal transformed into crumbs, the divine demon sword suddenly released a brilliant light that was as radiant as the sun. Level 10. Ling Han laughed heartily. The quality of the divine demon sword had already surpassed his cultivation level. However, because the sword was imbued with his martial intent, its might didn't increase significantly, even though its quality had already elevated another level. After all, without the input of a person, a tool would only be a tool. However, Ling Han wasn't worried about this. Now that the divine demon sword had caught up to his pace, its might would naturally increase once he advanced to the medium extreme. Xiao! A person suddenly shot over and landed 30 or so meters before Ling Han. "Leave your sword and then piss off," the person commanded coldly. This was a skinny man who wore a dark expression. His fingers were slender and powerful, and it was clear at a glance that he was also a wielder of swords. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh, and asked, "Are you trying to rob me?" This person was only at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, so where were his courage and confidence coming from? In fact, this wasn't surprising at all. Ling Han was suppressing his aura right now, so one wouldn't be able to determine his cultivation level unless they were also at the heavenly body tier. Moreover, he looked extremely young, so who would imagine that he was a heavenly body tier elite? "The sword will only be spoiled in your hands," the man said. There was a glimmer of excitement in his eyes as he gazed at the divine demon sword. Indeed, his gaze was a gaze that could only belong to those who truly loved swords. "The sword won't be spoiled in your hands?" Ling Han asked in retort. "Correct," the man replied proudly. "I started to practice swordplay at 5, and I was given the title of Sword Maniac at 17. My life is loyal to swords, and it is devoted to swords." Ling Han stabbed the divine demon sword into the earth with a smile, and said, "If you can pull the sword from the earth, then it's yours." He took a few steps back, signifying that this wasn't a trap. The man didn't see any problem with this. He was already at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, so he was definitely one of the most powerful people under 1 million years old. Only a rare few people could match him when it came to cultivation level, to say nothing of surpassing him. In his eyes, Ling Han's concession was only reasonable and natural. He walked over to retrieve the sword. Wang! A brilliant light instantly burst from the divine demon sword as if warning him not to walk any closer. The man was naturally unafraid, and he activated his own martial intent, ferociously unleashing his sword intent. He was going to use his sword intent to subdue the divine demon sword. The man and sword fought intensely. Gradually, the light that was radiating from the divine demon sword became dimmer and dimmer. It was as if it were running out of power to resist. Ling Han was slightly surprised. He wasn't surprised about the man's strength, nor was he surprised about the divine demon sword's weakness. In reality, the divine demon sword hadn't even unleashed 1/10,000th of its might. It was completely toying around with its opponent. It was this that had astonished Ling Han. The divine demon sword has actually learned to toy around with others? Only after developing a spirit and developing some intelligence would a sword know how to toy around with others. Ling Han involuntarily stroked his chin. The behavior of his weapon wasn't very serious. Where had it learned this from? He wasn't this unreliable, was he? Chapter 1377 Grand Sun Palace. The man with the dark expression was extremely confident. He felt that he wasn't far from pulling the divine sword from the ground. Sweat was dripping down his forehead. This was a tough and evenly matched battle. As such, he had to exert all of his strength in order to gain just the slightest of advantages. However, even though this was a strenuous battle, he was still brimming with pride. Only a divine sword like this was worthy of being his weapon. He roared loudly, and his aura suddenly increased explosively. He was going to subdue this divine sword with one final tug. Sure enough, the aura of the divine demon sword continued to fall. After a while, the man possessed an overwhelming advantage over the divine demon sword. He couldn't help but feel overjoyed. However, just as he was about to pull the divine sword from the ground, a burst of irresistible power suddenly erupted from the sword. Pung! He was instantly pushed back, heavily plunking on the ground with his rear. What? The man's mouth was slightly agape, an expression of disbelief sweeping across his face. How did that happen? Wasn't I just about to succeed? How did the divine sword suddenly fight back? Ding! The divine sword flew up by itself, exuding a warm divine light as it hovered in the air. This divine light wasn't very bright, yet it was filled with a vast and formidable aura. As if it were being guided by an invisible hand, the divine demon sword slowly drifted toward the man. This was the divine sword voluntarily recognizing its new master? The man couldn't help but feel fervent excitement. He had been pushed back by the divine demon sword just then, and that had allowed him to realize that this divine sword was far more valuable than he had initially imagined. Now, however, it was actually voluntarily recognizing him as its new master. Was this not an acknowledgement of his sword Dao? If not, why else would it recognize him as its master? He was pumping with excitement as he reached over, attempting to grasp the divine demon sword. Shwa! However, just as his hand was about to come into contact with the sword, the divine demon sword performed a slashing motion and cut a gash in his palm. It then suddenly turned around, ringing as it flew back and stopped above Ling Han's head. The blade of the sword trembled slightly as if it were the great Tao, and as if it were an eternal existence. The man's face was painted with shock. Then, this expression of shock gradually transformed into an expression of bitterness. As an elite of the sword Tao and as a sword maniac, how could he not understand what had just happened? The divine sword had been toying around with him. Moreover, a god tool toying around with a person. What did this signify? This signified that the divine sword had already developed a spirit. He couldn't help but feel even more delighted. However, he understood just how difficult it was to convince a sword with a spirit to acknowledge a new master. This would be impossible as long as Ling Han was still alive. Swords were the most loyal of god tools. The man was filled with envy as he stared at the divine demon sword. "This is a brilliant sword," he said. "I know," Ling Han replied with a slight nod. "Treat her well, and don't let her collect dust," the man urged. The focus and intensity in his eyes made it seem as if the divine demon sword wasn't a sword, but rather his beloved daughter who was now marrying into a family far, far away. It was as if he were a father who was reluctant to see his daughter leave. Ling Han felt goosebumps rising all over his body. "Your expression is far too creepy, okay?" No wonder he couldn't become a true swordsman. There was simply no way he could put so much focus and importance on his sword. There were far too many things that he needed to worry about. There were lovers, alchemy, fist techniques, and a myriad of other secret techniques. All of this consumed an exorbitant amount of his time. Thus, only a very small portion of his time was actually spent on practicing sword techniques. The man sighed before turning around and leaving in silence. In fact, he didn't even reveal his name. Ling Han shook his head. He then leaped into the sky and made his way toward the last unexplored territory of the first level. This was a palace that guarded the entrance to the second level. If one wanted to enter the second level, they would have to pass the examination in this palace first. As for the contents of this examination, it was none other than what had been examined in the intraclan competition before. Regarding what exactly they would be examined on, identifying medicinal ingredients or refining pills, this was unknown and completely up to the palace. Moreover, the supremely valuable medicine of the first level also lay inside this palace. It was just that no one had ever been able to retrieve it before. How fast was a heavenly body tier elite? Moreover, Ling Han was also heading directly toward his destination this time. Thus, it only took him 30 minutes to arrive before the palace. Ling Han landed and gazed at the gigantic palace before him. The words, Grand Sun Palace, were written above its doors. These words weren't exactly written beautifully, but they were filled with a magnanimous aura. This aura was as vast as the sea, and it was circulating with an indescribable rhythm of Tao. Ling Han couldn't help but take an extra glance at them. At this time, many members of the 4 major clans had already arrived. They all entered the palace to begin their examination. There was no time limit for how long one could remain in the first level. However, it would be a different story if one attempted the examination in the palace. If they succeeded, then all would be well. However, if they failed, a sandglass would appear above their heads. Once all of the sand flowed to the bottom, they would be booted out of the mystery realm. In fact, a sandglass would appear above one's head even if they successfully passed the examination. This sandglass represented how long one could remain in the second level. The better one's results, the longer they could remain. What would happen once this time expired? The answer to this was simple. Head to the palace of the second level and undertake another similar exam. There, one could win the right to enter the third level. Of course, this right would also come with a sandglass, and thus a time limit. Hence, the better one's results, the more time they would have to explore each level. The more time one had to explore each level, the more godly medicines they would naturally be able to harvest. In fact, it was because of this system that no one had ever entered the 9th level before. Simply put, no one had ever won enough time to reach the palace of the 8th level before. Without even reaching the palace to undergo an examination, how could one dream of entering the 9th level? However, Ling Han wasn't worried. Right now, there still wasn't any time limit hanging over his head. Thus, he remained standing before the palace, gazing at the words, Grand Sun Palace. Before he knew it, 3 days and 3 nights had already flashed by. At this moment, the origin power in his body suddenly became turbulent as if it sensed something. The only heavenly body in his dantian spun quickly, expanding with each revolution it completed. At the same time, the words, Grand Sun Palace, would also dim slightly with each revolution of his heavenly body. The transformation of the words was extremely minuscule, so much so that even heavenly body tier elites wouldn't be able to detect it unless they carefully examined it. Crowds of people continued to enter the palace, none of them paying any attention to the person standing outside. Everyone wanted to pass the examination of the first level and enter the second level. There, they would be able to harvest more godly medicines. Moreover, if they performed well in the examination, they might even receive pill recipes as a reward. Pung! Ling Han was immersed in the words when he suddenly felt his body shudder. Someone had collided into him and forcefully dragged him out from his peculiar state. He involuntarily frowned. After achieving a mysterious resonance with the Grand Sun Palace, his cultivation had improved significantly in just 30 minutes' time. If there were 100 steps between the early stage of the low extreme and the middle stage of the low extreme, then he had already traveled 50 of these steps just then. Moreover, these 50 steps had all been taken in the past 30 minutes. As for the time before that, he had only made very little progress. Corresponding to his progress, the words, Grand Sun Palace, had also dimmed to around half of their initial brightness. Moreover, after being drawn out due to its resonance with Ling Han, the mystical power of the words was also continuing to flow away. This flow didn't stop just because Ling Han had exited his peculiar state. In Ling Han's eyes, this was naturally a massive waste. Thus, he ignored the person who had collided with him and continued to stare at the 3 words. Using his divine sense as a bridge, he continued to absorb the mystical power that was flowing out from the words. Humph. You've blocked the path and collided into me, yet you still want to act as if nothing has happened? Behind Ling Han, there stood a haughty young man who wore an angry look on his face. He was the person who had collided into Ling Han. Just then, he had naturally seen Ling Han standing there. However, due to his pride and haughtiness, he hadn't changed his path to avoid Ling Han. Instead, he had continued to walk straight forward. In his mind, it was natural that others had to make way for him. If someone dared to stand in his way, he would simply crush them into the ground. However, Ling Han had entered a peculiar state, so he naturally couldn't have stepped aside to avoid the man. Thus, the man had walked into him without any hesitation. He wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson. Unexpectedly, however, it was as if he had walked into an iron wall. This wasn't an exaggeration, it was truly the case. He had already prepared himself and purposefully walked into Ling Han, yet it was actually him who had stumbled back due to the collision. In fact, he had even plunked on the ground with his rear. How could he accept this? How could he not feel embarrassment and fury? Chapter 1378 I'll teach you a sword technique. This young man was called Huang Peng, and he was a member of the Huang clan, one of the 4 major clans. He was extremely young, yet he had already advanced to the Sun Moon tier. Thus, he was as proud and haughty as could be. Ling Han ignored him and continued to focus on the 3 words, Grand Sun Palace. A great elite had sealed their formidable power inside these words, and thus resonating with them could actually elevate his cultivation. Perhaps the great elite had only casually written these 3 words. However, because they had been far too powerful, they had naturally imbued a wisp of their overwhelming power inside the words. This power was enough to help Ling Han advance 1 sub-minor level. Were these words written by a Genesis tier saint? Ling Han didn't mull over this for too long. Right now, all he wanted to do was absorb this power and elevate his cultivation. He could ponder these trivial matters later. Huang Peng was infuriated. Ling Han had actually spaced out again. Just how much was he belittling him? Wicked thoughts involuntarily surged into his mind. A malicious look flashed across his eyes, and a divine sword suddenly appeared in his hand. With a single motion, he slashed this sword at Ling Han's arm. After all, they were all members of the 4 major clans. Thus, he didn't dare to kill anyone inside this mystery realm. Slicing off Ling Han's arm would serve as good a warning as any. In any case, immortals were powerful beings, so losing an arm wouldn't be a huge deal. With a few months' rest, one's severed limbs would naturally grow back. Ding! His sword struck Ling Han's arms. However, sparks flew through the air as the blade of his sword bounced back up. He was completely unable to injure Ling Han. Huang Peng was stunned. What on earth was with this person's physique? His defenses were far too astounding. However, he instantly came to a realization. Ling Han was definitely doing this on purpose. He was pretending to be spaced out, yet he was actually fully focused and had already covered his entire body in an armor of origin power. It was also because of this that he had been able to block his strike. How detestable! The passers-by were all astonished. Was Ling Han stupid or crazy? He had been attacked by someone, yet he was still standing there and not retaliating? Huang Peng became even more enraged. He raised his sword and continued to attack Ling Han. Ding, 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 ding. Sparks flew through the air, yet Ling Han's physique was tougher than even godly metal. He remained unscathed no matter how Huang Peng attacked him. The people in the surroundings couldn't help but find this hilarious yet also curious. The toughness of Ling Han's physique was far too astonishing. Hearing the laughter around him, and seeing the mocking look in people's eyes, blood involuntarily rushed into Huang Peng's head. Killing intent instantly oozed from his body. At this moment, how could he still care about the relationship between the four major clans? The tip of his sword stabbed toward Ling Han's eyes. No matter what, one's eyes would definitely be the weakest part of their body. Regardless of how powerful one's physique, they would definitely still have some weak points. However, if someone were stabbed through the eye, their mind would definitely be obliterated if the weapon penetrated far enough. This was a matter of life and death. However, Huang Peng didn't care. Right now, he wanted Ling Han to die. Stop! There was a loud roar as a streak of sword light flashed over. Ding! Huang Peng's attack was instantly blocked. He raised his eyebrows, and said, Han Dong, you actually dare to meddle in my matters? The person who had blocked Huang Peng's attack was none other than the sword maniac who always wore a dark expression. His true identity was Han Dong, the rising star of the Han clan. He wore a desolate expression, and said, you're actually using the noble sword to perform such sneaky attacks. You're not worthy of using the sword. Huang Peng humphed, and said, sword maniac, is this brat a member of your Han clan? Hurry up, make him apologize to me. You're not worthy. Han Dong replied coldly. He wore a look of utter disdain. Very well. You all dare to belittle me? Do you think that I'm easy to push around? Huang Peng brandished his sword as he turned around to face Han Dong. Han Dong, how many years has it been since we last fought each other? A solemn expression appeared on Han Dong's face. Although he disdained Huang Peng's character, he didn't dare to belittle his strength. Thus, he also raised his sword, and said, it's been almost 300 years. Then let us battle again. Huang Peng slashed down with his sword, fusing into it his 4 suns and moons. The sword chi that burst from his sword transformed into a blood-red tiger that charged at Han Dong. Han Dong was naturally unafraid. It wasn't long before the two of them became locked in an intense battle. Meanwhile, Ling Han was in another world as he greedily absorbed the mystical power from the 3 words. There was only a single chance to absorb this power. However, who had ever stopped here to take an extra glance at the words before? It was because of this that this huge opportunity had fallen through to him. After almost 30 minutes, he finally shuddered and exited his trance-like state. Origin power surged through his body like the tumultuous waves of the sea. This origin power was at least 10 times more powerful than before. Middle stage of the low extreme. He hadn't failed his expectations, and had elevated his cultivation to the next subminor level. At this moment, he finally became aware of the commotion in the surroundings. He saw the intense battle between Han Dong and Huang Peng, both of who were wielding swords. Their battle was incredibly fiery. Both of them were fully absorbed in the battle, and thus their strikes were all ruthless and deadly. Although Ling Han had been immersed in another world just then, his body had still been present. Thus, nothing had escaped his observation. It was just that he had pushed all of these observations outside his mind. Now that he had returned to his senses, the scenes from before all flashed through his mind. Killing intent involuntarily flashed across his eyes. You walked into me first, yet you actually refused to apologize. So be it if that were all. Yet, you actually became enraged due to embarrassment and tried to harm and even kill me? What's the point of letting you live? However, this Han Dong person is fairly interesting. Ling Han suddenly lashed out. Wang! An overwhelming aura swept into the surroundings, forcefully dragging Han Dong and Huang Peng apart. This was the crushing advantage of heavenly body tier elites over sun-moon tier cultivators. Thus, Ling Han was naturally able to separate them with ease. Ling Han smiled at Han Dong and said, "I'll teach you a sword technique. Watch carefully. Who do you think you are? You actually dare to interfere in our battle?" Huang Peng roared in anger. He was extremely pissed off. Ling Han ignored him, using his index and middle finger like a sword as he unleashed the lightning sword technique. Shwa! Sword Shi burst forth and instantly sliced Huang Peng's body into two. Heaven's might wreaked havoc and instantly obliterated the two halves of his body. Only his divine sense managed to escape. Why you actually dared to destroy my body? Huang Peng was both stunned and enraged. Even if he possessed someone else's body, there was no way he could achieve a 100% affinity between his soul and his new host body. In other words, Ling Han had severed his cultivation path. Ling Han's gaze was frosty and piercing as he glanced at Huang Peng's divine sense. "Don't make me regret not killing you." This ice-cold gaze caused Huang Peng's divine sense to tremble in fear. He didn't dare to utter another word as he frantically fled into the distance. Ling Han's killing intent gradually disappeared. Although he hadn't obliterated Huang Peng's divine sense, he had buried a wisp of sword intent within it. This wisp of sword intent would erupt 3 years later, and at that time, it would be almost impossible for Huang Peng to escape death. This was the territory of the 4 major clans, after all, so he had chosen not to kill Huang Peng here. Even if powerful elites couldn't enter this mystery realm, he would eventually have to leave anyway. Thus, he couldn't take things too far. With things the way they were now, the Huang clan would definitely be enraged. However, Huang Peng was the one who had wronged him first, so it was likely that the Huang clan wouldn't have the face to complain. However, if he had killed Huang Peng, it would have been a completely different story. Meanwhile, Han Dong was still contemplating Ling Han's sword technique. Only after a long time did he say, "I was only able to grasp less than 1/10,000th of your sword intent." There was a look of fervent excitement on his face. That sword technique had been far too powerful. Moreover, it had been starkly different from the commonly practiced sword Dao of this age. It was a completely new path. Ling Han smiled as he performed the lightning sword technique again. At his cultivation level, there was naturally no need to focus on form anymore. What was important was one's intent realm. Han Dong obviously couldn't grasp the power of heaven's might. In any case, what Ling Han was teaching him was the mindset to challenge accepted regulations. Sure enough, this person wasn't stupid. After 3 days, he half-kneeled to Ling Han and respectfully bowed to show his gratitude. He then turned around to leave, not even entering the palace. With what he had comprehended and learned, his trip had already been completely worth it. Right now, he needed to return to cultivate in seclusion so that he could explore the intent realm of Ling Han's sword technique. Chapter 1379 Saint King Great Herb. This could be considered destiny. It was rare that he would encounter a sword maniac. Among Ling Han's 6 disciples, Kang Xiuyuan and Yun Yongwang both learned alchemy from him. In terms of cultivation, they merely pursued cultivation levels, while their battle prowess belonged to the category of weaklings among their peers. They had been misled by the bad influence he had been in his last life. Chen Ruijing wielded a saber, whereas Jiang Yefeng was a jack of all trades but a master of none, very similar to Ling Han in his last life as well. As for the 2 disciples he had taken in this lifetime, Ding Ping was more adept at a physical battle, using his fists to solve problems, because of his outstandingly ferocious strength. Though he had yet to teach Jiuyao much, the latter was outstandingly talented, and could summon demonic beasts, so the path he took would definitely not be the path of a swordsman either. Thus, Ling Han actually could not find anyone to inherit his lightning sword technique. Now, looking at how Han Dong was so completely focused on swordsmanship, and how their fates were now intertwined, he decided to teach him a part of the profound meanings of the lightning sword technique. Of course, aside from Ling Han, it was practically impossible for a second person to completely grasp the lightning sword technique in this world. Firstly, they would have to be capable of calmly observing in the midst of a heavenly tribulation, right? And that one trial would eliminate everyone else. Ling Han took in a deep breath, and strode into the Grand Sun Palace. At this moment, if there was anyone who deigned to pay attention, they would discover that though the three words were still as majestic as they had been, they seemed to have lost a certain implicit charm. Middle stage of the low extreme, great. Ling Han was extremely pleased. If he had depended on his own effort to cultivate, even if he had endless alchemical pills he could ingest, he would need as many as 100 years to complete accumulating so much, but not even half a day had passed now. If he was still not satisfied with that, then that would really be too demanding. He couldn't help but be even more expectant. In the remaining 8 palace halls, could he also obtain this kind of gain? This caused him much excitement, and even his steps sped up slightly. There were not much furnishings in the palace hall. It was actually designed with the center empty. Rather than calling it a palace hall, it would be more appropriate to call it a large-scale garden, as there was a stalk of grass growing right in the center. It was obviously a stalk of grass, but was as tall as 300 meters. It was completely dark green in color, and a tiny fruit was borne on the very top. The fruit was only about the size of a soybean, completely disproportionate with the massive size of the plant itself. Yet Ling Han immediately looked astonished. He had now grasped a total of 810,000 basic godly medicines of the immortal realm. Even if there were new varieties, they would have evolved from the 810,000 types of godly medicines. He could trace the roots and deduce the medicinal effects of the new breed. And this stalk in front of him was a level 20 godly medicine. Godly medicines that had reached level 17 could be called Saint Herbs, and level 20, that would be a Saint King Great Herb. If one ingested this fruit, would it be capable of allowing a mortal to reach the heavens in one go and directly become a Genesis tier elite? Though the battle prowess of this kind of Genesis tier elite would definitely be the lowest among his peers, it was definite that he would still be able to easily suppress all those below the Genesis tier. Without speaking of anything else, merely the words Saint King Great Herb were enough to cause a stir. But in these millions of years, this great herb had always been here because, firstly, it had not ripened, and secondly, it definitely had to be too difficult to harvest. Ling Han saw very clearly. It was not a puppet that was guarding this Saint Herb, but rather a formation. He could not dispel it, it was too complex. He had a feeling that this was a supreme killing formation. If he attempted to dispel it, he would definitely encounter a merciless attack, and with his present power, it would mean definite death. He summoned out the notionless saint while everyone was not paying attention. "Brat, let me warn you, if you dare disrupt my cultivation again, I will eat." The notionless saint was just complaining. This brat was really too unconscientious. He kept throwing him out to block disasters every now and then. However, when he saw the Saint Herb in front of them, he immediately looked stunned, and exclaimed in shock, "Heavenly origin Dao fruit." Ling Han was surprised, and asked, "Senior, do you also recognize this Saint Herb?" Even he had only found out after reading various illustrated handbooks of godly medicines. Nonsense. As a saint, I naturally am very familiar with all the Saint Herbs in this world, the notionless saint retorted with disdain. He actually dared to doubt the insight of a saint? That was really underestimating him too much. Ling Han snickered, and asked, "Then does Senior have a way to dispel this formation?" "As long as we can transplant it into the Black Tower, we can have as many Saint Herbs as we eat rice grains in future." This was naturally an exaggeration. However, it was extremely possible that they could harvest a Saint Herb every few million years, and this was already very, very shocking. The notionless saint did not answer Ling Han, but rather continued to stare at the formation. Not long later, a layer of cold sweat actually gathered on his forehead. He couldn't help but shiver, and said, "A supreme killing formation. A supreme killing formation. Can we dispel it?" Ling Han hurriedly asked. He also knew that this was a supreme killing formation, but how could it be dispelled? It cannot be dispelled. The notionless saint shook his head. It can only be forcibly barged through, but with the might of this killing formation, perhaps even saint kings could be killed. When he said these words, he was very much at a loss. This meant that they could only stare at this great herb helplessly. If even saint kings could be killed, then those strong enough in this world to forcibly dispel this formation and harvest the saint herb would really be numbered. Not only would they have to become a saint king, their battle prowess would also have to be outstanding. They might have to be a 6-star genius, 8-star genius, or even 10-star genius. Ling Han thought for a moment. Since he was completely incapable of collecting this saint herb at this moment, he had best not confuse himself further on this matter. He should turn his attention onto other areas. With a wave of his hand, he drew the notionless saint back into the Black Tower. This saint had to be very gloomy. Just think, he had once belonged to the strongest group in this world, yet was now easily summoned and dismissed with a single thought from Ling Han. He was now treated completely like a babysitter. Ling Han passed this saint herb by, and arrived at the second half of the palace hall. There was a passageway ahead of him, and the end would be the second floor of the Medicine King's cave. There were no guards. It was simply an empty pathway, but no matter how many people walked in, they would very soon disappear. It was extremely bizarre. Ling Han strode forwards. He took care to observe, but without his knowledge, the people in front of him had vanished, and when he took a few more steps ahead, the sound of footsteps behind him had disappeared as well. He had become all alone. The scene changed, and he appeared inside a stone chamber. There was a stone table in front of him, and there was only an hourglass on the table. However, the sand within was not flowing. Random trial, identifying medicinal ingredients. A cold voice rang out, containing not even the slightest bit of emotion. Within the time limit, the more identified, the better the results will be. Begin. Without giving Ling Han any time to prepare himself, the hourglass began to count down, and an image of a medicinal ingredient appeared in front of Ling Han. If he used his hand to stimulate it, the medicinal ingredient could even be spun left and right, turned up and down, showing all the details. Black sun tear sesame. Fiery maple orchid leaf. Watertooth grass. Purple heaven ironwood root. Ling Han answered very swiftly. Usually, when the medicinal ingredient turned once, he would immediately call out its name. Thus, there was practically no pause in the images, and they were rapidly changing. The sand in the hourglass flowed, and completely finished in about an hour later. Past, the cold voice declared. Pa, a jade scroll suddenly appeared on the stone table, and at the same time, the image of a second hourglass appeared above Ling Han's head. Furthermore, it was already starting to count down. Going by the speed that the sand was flowing at, it could last for about 10 days. 10 days. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Chapter 1380 Ancient Tao Green Lotus. The 4 great clans had entered here multiple times, and naturally had a very firm grasp of the details. Going by Lin Yuqi's words, in the history of the 4 great clans, the longest time one of them stayed on the second floor was 5 days. That was an unusual genius. He was not skilled in concocting alchemical pills, but focused on identifying medicinal ingredients, and was especially skilled in putting them together. At the time, he had been extraordinarily lucky. It just so happened that the test was about the category he was skilled in, and he had thus attained the best result in history and managed to stay 5 days, establishing a historical record. After him, no matter how prodigious or genius those who came after were, they only managed to stay for 3 days. After all, this did not only require abilities, but also required exceptionally good luck. But Ling Han, he possessed 10 days' time. This was enough for him to stay over 9 days on the second floor, and on the last day, he could head to the next palace hall and attempt advancing onto the 3rd floor. Boom, this stone chamber was collapsing and crumbling. Ling Han hurriedly grabbed the jade scroll on the stone table. When the stone chamber had turned completely into nothing, he appeared in the space of the second floor. This was no longer a hilly region, but rather a damp area. Obviously, the godly medicine growing here needed an environment rich in water. The map of this second floor is much simpler and cruder. Ling Han drew out a new map. Because there was a limit to the time that one could stay here, and there were not many that could pass the test, the map of the second floor was obviously not complete and accurate enough. And this was still the second floor. The map of every subsequent floor would be even simpler and cruder, and when he reached the 8th floor, there was only an outline of the terrain. There was not even any indication what level of godly medicine was there on this floor. Ling Han put away the map. He continued to fly towards a certain area whilst drawing out the jade scroll he had just obtained. His divine sense swept over it, and innumerable information instantly appeared in his mind. That included 20 pill recipes, which corresponded with respective concoction techniques for level 1 to 20 alchemical pills, nothing more and nothing less. Ling Han already knew some of the pill recipes, but the majority was not known to him. Exceptional talent Black Origin Pill. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was a level 10 alchemical pill, and could be ingested by anyone in the low extreme of heavenly body tier to the medium extreme. It had the effect of greatly increasing one's cultivation level, but was not as impressive as the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, wherein a single pill could provide the boost of a sub-minor level. But without a doubt, this was a method to rapidly increase one's cultivation level in the heavenly body tier. The main ingredients. I am still missing 3 of them at present. Ling Han did not worry about how difficult the concoction technique would be. His main dilemma would always be the problem of medicinal ingredients. Hopefully, I can find all of them here. Ling Han did not put away the jade scroll. After he had obtained the pill recipes, the jade scroll had shattered. Obviously, it could only be inherited once. He flew the whole way, heading towards a specific destination. There was a divine lotus there, and going by his calculations, it just happened to be the time for the divine lotus to ripen at present. Very quickly, a refreshing fragrance wafted over. The mere smell caused his spirit to be energized and the origin power inside his body to become lively. If he cultivated here, it would definitely be half the work, but twice the effect. It was too bad that even a freak like Ling Han could only stay here for 10 days, so even if the effects of your cultivation increased tenfold, what about it? It was completely like a cup of water on a pruning cart of firewood, completely negligible. Very soon, a green lotus appeared ahead of him. Ancient Tao Green Lotus, a level 10 godly medicine. This green lotus was only 3 feet tall, and grew in a golden pool. It bore a lotus dish that was the size of a fist, and bore 36 lotus seeds on it. It could be seen that there was also a golden carp swimming around in the pool. The lotus fragrance wafted, and the mere smell of it would make one feel carefree and relaxed. From top to bottom, from the seeds themselves to the leaves, this green lotus could be used in medicine. The lotus seeds and root were the most valuable, reaching the height of level 10. In the case of the lotus leaves, they could only be used in level 9 alchemical pills. Ling Han was not the first person to arrive here. There were already 7 people standing in the proximity of the pool. However, not one dared to easily enter into the pool, because that fish swimming around in the pool was not something that could be easily dealt with. Even if it was now very peaceful and looked very ordinary, if anyone really went into the water, it would immediately reveal its malevolent face and kill the intruder without even blinking. This had already been proved countless times. The first floor had puppets, whereas the second floor had demonic beasts. They lived alongside the godly medicine in a mutually beneficial relationship. Ho ho, since you're all so modestly declining, I will help myself, a young man calmly stated. He took one step, and stepped onto the surface of the water. He was actually capable of standing in midair. It had to be known that only when a cultivator had reached the heavenly body tier would he be capable of flight. However, he was obviously only in the sun-moon tier, yet could actually stand in midair. This was not logical. Ling Han looked at the man's shoes. There were multiple divine patterns glowing on them. They should be a god tool whose use was to give a person the ability of flight. The young man strode forwards, and did not disturb the fish underneath him. Very soon, he had reached the side of the green lotus. No one made a move. They were all waiting for that young man to harvest the divine lotus, and then would attempt to snatch it from him. It would definitely be much safer to snatch it from a human being than fighting with the demonic fish below. But their thoughts were obviously too wishful. When the young man approached the green lotus, the water splashed, and the golden carp leaped out of the water. It opened its mouth and spat out a bubble at the young man. This bubble was completely black, and there were halos entwined on its surface. It rapidly became larger. If the young man wanted to pluck the green lotus, he definitely could not avoid this bubble. Thus, he had to either give up on his plans to pluck the lotus and withdraw, or make a move to receive the oncoming attack and see who would come out better off. He chose the latter option, and did not dare to be careless in the slightest. He drew out an ancient mirror, which floated above his head. Immediately, a pillar of light shot out and struck at the water bubble. But even though the pillar of light hit its target, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without any sign. It did not even incite the slightest ripple on the bubble. The young man was astonished, and was just about to withdraw and retreat. Yet it was too late, for the bubble had reached and wrapped around him. Pang! 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 It could be seen that the young man was struggling in the water bubble. He was endlessly attacking, wanting to break his way out, but things turned out contrary to his wishes. He was completely incapable of breaking through the shackles of the water bubble. Very quickly, the bubble had descended back into the water. That golden carp opened its mouth once more, and the bubble was sucked and swallowed back into its mouth. A large human had actually been swallowed alive by a carp that was not even a foot long. This scene was slightly bizarre. Hiss, this demonic carp has become even stronger. The remaining 6 people on the banks of the pond all exclaimed in shock. Since they dared to harvest the green lotus, they had naturally done their preparations. They knew the abilities of this demonic carp. But, the moment the demonic carp made its move, they still received a scare. The strength of its abilities had far exceeded their expectations. We've miscalculated. It may be that the ancient Tao green lotus has ripened, which also allowed this demonic carp to obtain massive gains, boosting its abilities greatly. That's right. The demonic beasts here all live alongside the godly medicine, and when the godly medicine ripens, the demonic beasts would definitely become stronger. However, I had never thought that it would reach such an extent. These people all shook their heads. They only felt a helplessness that came from their inability to harvest the godly medicine, yet did not have the slightest intention to rescue their companion that had been swallowed. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. His right hand stretched out and grabbed at empty air. His origin power took the form of a giant hand that grabbed out at that green lotus. Seeing how Ling Han had still not given up, the 6 people all smirked coldly, looking like they were planning to enjoy the show. Chapter 1381 Fighting Lin Zihong. The golden carp once again leaped out of the water, and spat out a black bubble as well. Ling Han's right hand grabbed out at empty air, and that giant hand of origin power also clenched. Boom, a powerful wave instantly rose up in the pool, slamming down onto that carp. Due to the powerful attack, the carp was suddenly sent flying. It opened its mouth and spat out a human being. It was precisely the young man that it had swallowed before. The moment he appeared, he screamed in agony. Apparently, the majority of the flesh and blood on his body had been corroded by the carp's stomach acid. This carp would first directly swallow living humans, then digest them slowly with its stomach acid. It could be imagined how much agonizing pain this young man had sustained. Thankfully, as long as his spirit was not destroyed and his dantian was not ruined, no matter how serious his injuries, there was still a chance he could recover. Seeing this scene, the 6 people on the poolside were all stunned, bowled over by Ling Han's abilities. He was too strong. It was merely an embodiment of origin power, and he easily defeated the carp with it. This was an overwhelming level of strength. The 6 people immediately abandoned their thoughts of trying to snatch the divine lotus by force. Hurriedly, they turned and left, fearing that Ling Han would kill them off so that they would not leak out his secret. I never thought that this ancient Dao green lotus would end up in the hands of an outsider like you. A figure swept past, and Lin Zihong was standing by the side of the pool. Looking at him arrogantly, he declared, "Hand over the divine lotus." "Then what?" Ling Han asked calmly. He had provoked him time and time again. Did he really think that he didn't have a temper? And then, it seemed like Lin Zihong had not expected that Ling Han would counter with a question like this, so he was initially blank before he declared, "And then, kneel on the ground, and give me 100 kowtows." Ling Han looked at the other party, and asked, "I don't seem to have offended you, right?" "Hee, you actually dare bear designs on a woman that I have my eye on, and you still dare say you have not offended me?" Lin Zihong asked, smirking coldly. Only he and Ling Han were here, so he naturally did not bother to further conceal his inner thoughts. Ling Han gave an "oh," and said, "Going by that theory, you are determined to kill me then? You won't get off so easily." Lin Zihong smirked. "I will first destroy your physical body, then slowly refine your divine sense, and let you die in an incredibly agonizing manner." Ling Han gave an "oh," broke into a smile, and asked, "Since you are saying that, I can also boldly kill you without worries, and need not be concerned if I am too heavy-handed in my attack." You are merely in the low extreme. How could you be a match for me?" Lin Zihong smiled proudly. "I am at the peak stage of the medium extreme, and furthermore, I am a 3-star genius. Even if you are a 4-star genius, and are at the peak stage of the low extreme, you are far from becoming a worthy match for me." He was so sure that Ling Han would definitely not be an equal match for him, and that was why he was acting so overbearing. Ling Han murmured, "Since you are so confident in yourself, if you get your words thrown back at you later, you had better not cry. Who asked you to have so little insight, daring attempt to snatch my woman?" Lin Zihong made a move, and grabbed out at Ling Han. His power rolled out and reached the height of the late stage of the high extreme. It was extremely frightening. But the heaven and earth here was much sturdier than the outside world, and even if a heavenly body tier attacked, there would not be any damage. Only slight ripples were created on the water surface. Lin Zihong's face was filled with contempt. He was confident enough that he could suppress Ling Han with a single strike. The gap in cultivation level between the two of them was really much too big. Ling Han also brandished a fist out at Lin Zihong. Peng, the power of both sides clashed, and finally formed a massive impact that caused waves to erupt on the water surface as they rolled out unhindered and fiercely. Lin Zihong's whole expression was filled with shock. Ling Han actually managed to parry this strike from him. Not only had he parried it, it was done with much ease. This was something he could not accept. The other was merely in the low extreme, so how could he possibly be this strong? In terms of power, Ling Han was indeed no match for Lin Zihong. However, he had used Tide of the Ages. Though he had only released a slight bit of its might, it was enough to age the latter's power to a level that he could hold up against. How could this be? Lin Zihong could not accept it. A mere low extreme cultivator, how could you possibly be capable of standing against me? Ignorant fool. Ling Han's eyes became menacing. His killing intent had already been ignited. Humph. Lin Zihong soon adjusted his way of thinking. So what if he could contend against him? He was the son of the clan patriarch of the Anyuan branch. Though this branch had indeed declined, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. His background was still incredibly astonishing, so how could it be matched by a savage? He drew out a drum. It was very old and dilapidated, and it was visible that one corner of it was already broken. Images of battles were drawn on the body of the drum, vivid and lifelike, exuding the killing aura that was unique to the battlefield. Tong! He stretched out his hand and clapped onto the drum. Immediately, a low rumble was heard from the battle drum, and shot towards Ling Han's chest like an arrow, causing his heart to involuntarily beat very rapidly for a while. A sliver of blood seeped out of the corner of Ling Han's lips. He shockingly discovered that a hole had actually been torn in his heart. This was extremely astonishing. With how astonishing his physique was, though the strength of his heart could not be compared to the sturdiness of his godly bones, it had almost reached the extent of level 10 godly metal, and now it had actually ruptured. This drum was not so simple. More importantly, Ling Han had been struck without his knowledge. He completely had not discovered where the attack had come from, and this was truly the most bizarre aspect of it. It could not be guarded against. Huh, you want to fight me, you are unqualified. Lin Zihong smirked coldly, his eyes focused on Ling Han. He suddenly delivered a palm strike. Pooh! This time, Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood. Die! Lin Zihong once again raised his hand, but just at this moment, Ling Han moved. He used the star-plucking step, and had crossed the distance of more than 20 meters in an instant. Tong! The battle drum once again rang out loudly, but Ling Han was not the slightest bit affected. As expected. Ling Han smiled. With the channeling of the indestructible heaven scroll, his heart had already recovered. The drumbeat is shapeless, and cannot be avoided, but that is merely an object, after all. It needs to lock down on its target, so as long as I avoid being locked down by your divine sense, the battle drum would be able to do nothing against me. You monster! Lin Zihong was dumbfounded. He had actually found the loophole in his attack after being hit twice only. Was he really human? Furthermore, this guy had sustained 2 consecutive hits from the drumbeats, and he actually just spat out a mouthful of blood. His heart, though, had not exploded. This was too ridiculous. It's my turn. Ling Han drew his sword. Wang, the divine demon sword seemed to have been provoked, and without waiting for Ling Han to issue a command, it exuded divine light by itself, seeming to be extremely restless. Ling Han simply let go, and the divine demon sword instantly flew out, slashing out towards Lin Zihong. To be more specific, it was slicing out at that battle drum. Tong! 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 Lin Zihong hurriedly struck the battle drum. It was not only capable of killing living beings, it also had terrifying destructive effects on god tools. The sound wave that could not be seen nor touched swept out towards the divine demon sword. This was the power of regulations. This battle drum had been forged by an old ancestor in the eternal river tier of the Hengyun branch. It could only be stimulated by someone who was at least in the heavenly body tier. It made use of the regulations of sound waves to hurt one's enemies, shapeless and formless, and it was one of the 3 precious treasures of the Hengyun branch. It was also because Lin Zihong was the single son of the present clan patriarch. If not, how could he possibly have been allowed to bring it out? Otherwise, what if they encountered an eternal river tier elite who snatched it away by force? Then the Hengyun branch that had been initially declining would only become worse. The divine demon sword struck out, and was actually not affected in the slightest. Chapter 1382 Self-Explosion. Lin Zihong was stunned. The divine sword slashed towards him, and it was actually completely unaffected. Going by his impression, the moment the drumbeat was heard, any kind of god tool would be forcibly shattered and turn into multiple pieces that would sweep past him, without any bit of destructive power left in them. How could he know that the divine demon sword itself was in the category of divine metal? If you used brute force to blast it, there was definitely a maximum limit that the divine demon's sword could sustain, but now, if it was in mere terms of regulations, what would divine metal be afraid of? He could see that the sword was just about to strike him. It had not even reached him physically, and that frightening coldness already scared him out of his wits. If he was really struck, that would definitely mean instant death. What kind of sword was this? It was really too terrifying. He hurriedly bounced backwards in retreat whilst repeatedly clapping the battle drum. He still had not given up on striking the divine demon's sword down or even taking it as his own. But this was destined to be only a mere dream. The divine demon's sword had already leaped into level 10, and was equal to Lin Zihong in terms of cultivation level. And if their cultivation level was equal, if a precious tool forged from divine metal could not overwhelm him, why would it be called divine metal in the first place? Shwa, shwa, shwa. The sword intent was extravagant, forming a large web that was endless and boundless. Lin Zihong tried his best to break out of the siege, but he had still been hit a few times by the sword intent. Immediately, blood gushed out of his body, and could not be stopped no matter what. This was still because it was the sword intent that had cut him. If it had been the actual divine sword that had directly slashed into him, the murderous aura would enter his body and cause even more damage. Hey! Ling Han called out. Suddenly, Lin Zihong's hair stood on ends. He had only cared about dealing with the divine demon sword, and had not looked where he was going in his panic. He had actually retreated within proximity of Ling Han, and this voice had precisely rang out from behind him. However, to defeat the enemy, the chief had to be captured first. Since this was Ling Han's god tool, then he would only need to subdue Ling Han. By then, how would he still be able to control the precious tool? With this thought, Lin Zihong immediately regained his confidence. He suddenly turned around and formed his hand into a claw that grabbed out at Ling Han. "I'll break your dog's paw," Ling Han uttered, smiling. He actually dared to get into a close-quarters battle with him. Where had his courage come from? He shot out a fist that struck at the other's hand. Pang! The two of them exchanged blows. This time, it was not just a clash of origin power, both their hands had also crashed into each other. Lin Zihong's initially confident expression immediately crumbled, and an expression of great pain appeared on his face. Hi's fingers had all been broken, each of them sticking upright. His flesh had been split, and blood was pouring. The sight of his hand was horrible to see. The nerves of the fingertips were linked with the heart, so it was naturally extremely painful. Lin Zihong also felt a powerful shock. In terms of power, he was at an advantage, so in a situation where both of them still had to reserve some origin power as defense, he would definitely be better off than Ling Han. But now, the situation was that his 5 fingers had all been broken, and Ling Han, on the contrary, was completely unharmed. How was that just? Using 2 fingers like he would a sword, Ling Han moved to tap on Lin Zihong's forehead. In this crucial moment of life and death, a powerful survival instinct suddenly erupted in Lin Zihong. Without bothering about the agonizing pain of his right hand, he forcefully bounced back in retreat. "Take care of your back," Ling Han advised. But how could Lin Zihong actually deign to listen to the words of his enemy? Using the back of his hand, he struck the battle drum. With them being so close, Ling Han definitely wouldn't be able to dodge. Die! Die! Pooh! His hand had not even touched the battle drum when he felt a coldness in his chest. He could see a section of the tip of a sword penetrate out of his own chest. The divine demon sword. He had actually forgotten that there was such a fatal weapon present. Just like how he had experienced too much pressure when facing the divine demon sword, causing him to forget about Ling Han, now Ling Han had similarly given him a pressure that came from his possible death, causing him to temporarily forget about the divine demon sword. However, this was fatal. The divine sword penetrated his body, and furthermore stabbed into such a vital part like the heart. How could he be saved from that? The murderous aura spread out inside Lin Zihong's body. His heart was the first to shatter, and he had instantly suffered a serious wound. However, this was not the most frightening part of it, because the murderous aura was currently attacking his mind and Dantian. If his Dantian was destroyed, he would lose all his cultivation. If his mind was shattered, his spirit would disperse. Lin Zihong paled in fear. At this moment, he really felt the approach of death. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he called out to Ling Han, Save me. Ling Han was shocked. What kind of weirdo was this? He actually asked him to save him? I am the young clan master of the Anyuan branch, and you are just a guest official. I command you. Lin Zihong shouted loudly. He tried his best to suppress the expansion of the murderous aura inside his body, but this was the power of regulation that was brought by the divine metal. How could its destructive ability be resisted by a mere heavenly body tier? It could be claimed that even if it was a Genesis tier that had his vital point stabbed like this, he similarly would receive a serious injury. At most, he could forcefully subdue his injuries, but it was impossible that it would heal by itself. Ling Han couldn't help but become speechless. Even at this point in time, this guy was still showing off his superiority. I will let you have Lin Yuqi. Lin Zihong called out sharply. Time was almost up. The murderous aura had spread up into his throat and down into his lower abdomen. It was only a step away from his mind and Dantian. She is not yours in the first place, so how can you say you will let me have her? Furthermore, I have completely no designs on Lin Yuqi. It was only your own wishful thinking, Ling Han stated calmly. He was naturally not about to make a move to save him. An expression of hopelessness appeared on Lin Zihong's face. At the same time, he was filled with deep regret. At this point in time, Ling Han should not be deceiving him. It was all his fault for being too petty. No, ultimately, it was because he was too arrogant. Even if he was a suspected love rival, what about it? With a stretch of his hand, he could have easily erased him. In any case, everyone in this world were ants in his eyes. This kind of mentality caused him to be without the slightest scruples, condescending and supercilious to all around him. However, this kind of hopelessness and regret only flashed briefly before disappearing. In the next instant, he became crazy. Since he was definitely dying, he would pull Ling Han down with him. Explode, he roared, taking the initiative to shatter his Dantian. Two heavenly bodies fiercely crashed into each other, creating a terrifying storm of power. If a heavenly body tier elite self-exploded, even if he was only in the medium extreme, its might could match the full power attack of the low extreme, or even the medium extreme, of the Eternal River tier. Suddenly, the frightening power formed a tsunami that blasted out in all directions with Lin Zihong as the center. The strongest attack from an Eternal River tier, what heavenly body tier could block that? Lin Zihong's physical body shattered in the first instant. His spirit left his body, and the murderous aura from the divine demon's sword followed him like a shadow. However, he could still struggle away from death for a short while. He wanted to see Ling Han die in his hands with his own eyes. Ling Han's figure flashed, and he had already entered into the Black Tower. At this time, he would naturally not be forcing himself to see if his physique would really be capable of surviving the attack of an Eternal River tier. Then, he took a step out. Because he had moved too quickly, it was practically as if he had not left at LL. When he saw that Ling Han was standing in front of him completely unharmed, and that there had not even been any damage done to his clothes, Lin Zihong's spirit completely twisted. He released a defiant roar, but when the murderous aura of the divine demon's sword swept over him, his spirit also wilted instantly. This time, his spirit and form had truly been destroyed. He had not even left behind the smallest bit of his remains. This can be considered as having settled our relationship of karma, Ling Han said calmly, though he stretched out a hand to put away the spatial spirit tool that had been left behind after Lin Zihong had self-exploded. He took a look. TSK, as expected of the son of a clan patriarch. Not only was there over 100 million true origin stones, there was also a considerable amount of godly metal and medicinal ingredients, which were all extremely valuable. Of course, the most valuable item was that battle drum. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.